Okay, delegates. So it's 11:30 and I think it's time to start. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Keshava and I'll be the chair for today's and tomorrow's committee, sorry. And I know a lot of you are first timers, because I was a first time myself and I know what it feels like. But what I'd like to tell you is take this as a, what do you call it? As a kind of like a learning path, yeah? So don't feel, scared or anything like that, because MUN is, a place where you can also learn and you learn a lot of skills. So it's something to keep in mind. And I'm joined by Vanati, who will be the vice chair, and Arjun Manivandan, who will be the rapporteur. So delegates, if you have any thing to ask or any chits, you may text your rapporteur, Arjun Manivandan, here. So Arjun and I think Vanati, you can introduce yourself.
So good morning, everyone. I'm the vice chair for the committee and I'm Vanti. And just same as Keshava, I'd just like to say that, so don't be afraid to make any mistakes. You can always ask the chairs if you have a doubt or anything like that. And most importantly, don't forget to have fun today. I hope that you'll have a fruitful committee. So thank you.
Hi delegates, I'm Arjun Manivandan and I'm going to be your rapporteur today. So yeah, just like they said, try to be active today. There's no reason to be scared. Everyone has a first time. No one judging you. This is a learning opportunity. So try to speak as much as you can for all the first timers. So looking forward to an active committee.
Okay, so I'm seeing that a lot of delegates are not in video mode. So I'm asking them to please enable their videos. For example, Delegate of Brazil, Delegate of Uruguay, Zimbabwe, South Africa, India. Can you please turn on your videos? Thank you. So for the first timers, basically what's going to happen now, we're going to have roll call. I'll be honest with you, like roll call does not really happen in the UN, but since this is a model United Nations, we like to make sure that everyone is present. So basically what happens in a roll call is that we'll be calling out countries, yeah, and we'll be seeing if they're present, absent, or present voting. So the difference between present and voting is that by saying present, you can choose to vote or abstain to vote. Well, if you choose present and voting, you cannot abstain to vote, meaning you cannot, during a voting procedure, you cannot choose not to vote. So that's something to keep in mind. And we'll begin roll call now. It's in alphabetical order. So Delegate of Egypt, you may unmute and say that you're present or present voting or absent if you're not replying. Do we have Delegate of Egypt here? So it seems like he's absent. Delegate of the Argentine Republic.
Present.
Delegate of Canada.
Present.
Delegate of Australia.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Present and voting.
Delegate of Uruguay.
Present.
Delegate of Brazil.
Present.
Delegate, can you repeat? Are you present and voting, or are you just present, delegate?
Did you say Brazil? Actually, my thing some problems.
Not an issue, delegate, present.
I'm present and voting.
Present and voting. Okay. Delegate of Germany.
Present and voting.
Delegate of France.
Present.
Delegate of Greece.
Present.
Delegate of Ireland. Delegate of Ireland. We'll move on. Delegate of Italy.
Present.
Delegate of Japan, Delegate of Japan, Delegate of Belgium,
Present and voting.
Delegate of Netherlands,
Present.
Delegate of Sweden,
Present.
Delegate of China, Delegate of China, Delegate of Portugal, Delegate of Portugal, Delegate of Austria,
Present and voting.
Delegate of Cameroon, Delegate of Cameroon, Delegate of India,
Present and voting.
Delegate of Korea, just like to point out that's the Delegate of South Korea, Delegate of South Korea, Delegate of Mali, Delegate of Slovenia, Delegate of Slovenia, Delegate of South Africa,
Present.
Delegate of Turkey,
Present and voting.
Delegate of Zimbabwe,
Present.
Delegate of Russia, Delegate of Russia, Delegate of Israel,
Present and voting.
Delegate of the United States of America,
Present and voting.
Delegate of United Arab Emirates,
Present and voting.
Delegate of the UK,
Present and voting.
Delegate of Mexico,
Present and voting.
all right, delegates. So the roll call is done. So now the floor is open for motions. Are there any motions on the floor? Yes, Delegate of USA, you have been recognized.
A motion to open session and introduce a agenda.
Right, moving to voting procedure. What is the agenda, Delegate?
The delegate for the United States of America proposes that the committee adopt the agenda of the Israel-Palestine conflict.
All right, delegates in favor of the motion? So the motion clearly passes. Now we'll be opening GSL for the time limit of 1 minute per speaker. Delegates wishing to speak on the GSL. So delegates, for the time being, we only have 10 delegates on the first GSL, and delegates who may not wish to speak later can raise their hands later. So now we'll have Delegate of France, Delegate of Germany, Delegate of USA, Delegate of Israel, Delegate of DPRK, Delegate of Mexico, Delegate of Japan, Delegate of India, Delegate of UAE, and Delegate of Belgium. So any delegates that raise their hand, they may raise their hand for the next GSL. So Delegate of France, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Honorable Executive Board, respected delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege for the Delegate of French Republic to be a part of Model United Nations to play a constructive role in the global concern. France is committed to the Middle East peace process, where it considers that the two-state solution as the only solution able to meet the legitimate aspirations of the both Israelis and the Palestinians to security, independence, recognition, and dignity. France calls for compliance with international law, in particular the relevant United Nations resolutions. Therefore, it promotes a two-state solution, that is United Nations General Assembly Resolution of 181, a fair solution regarding refugees, United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194, the end of Israeli occupation, United Nations Security Council Resolution of 242, and the preservation of the status of Jerusalem, National Security Council Resolution 476 and
Please wrap up
478.
your speech, Delegate.
Excuse me.
Delegate, your time is up. Can you wrap up your speech?
Well, the goal was threefold: to reaffirm the necessity of implementing a two-state solution for a lasting peace. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Do we have any points? Delegates who have points? Delegate of India.
Thank you, Chair. The delegate proposes to increase the speaker.
Sorry, delegate, we were asking if you had any points. Can be a point of information, point of order on Delegate of France's speech.
No, Chair.
All right. Delegate of DPRK, do you have any point?
No, Chair.
Right. So we'll move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Delegate of France. We will have Delegate of Germany. Yeah, you now have the floor, Delegate.
Yes, Chair. Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. Israel-Palestine conflict is a 100-year-old issue. The unresolved conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is one of the key fields of conflict in the Middle East. While religion is involved, the conflict is mostly about two groups of people who claim the same land. At the root of the conflict are rival claims to the area between Jordan and the Mediterranean. Tensions between the two people grew when the international community gave Britain the task of establishing a national home in Palestine for Jewish people. For Jews, it was their ancestral home, but Palestine Arabs claimed the land and opposed the move. In 1948, while the British rulers left unable to solve the problem, Jewish leaders declared the creation of the State of Israel, which covers 78% of the area. The Palestinians, for their part, are seeking an independent Palestinian state in the territories occupied by Israel during the 1967 Six-Day War. Israel claims the whole of Jerusalem as its capital, while Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state.
Delegate, please wrap up your speech.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have the Delegate of USA. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, EB. The conflict for territory in and around the state of Israel has posed geopolitical, ideological, and religious quandary to the global community, the people of Israel, and surrounding nations for generations. Despite moments of promise throughout history, a lasting compromise has never been reached. In the meantime, lives are at stake. Rocket attacks in May by Hamas took 13 Israeli lives and killed an unknown number of Gazans. Tactics like tunnel warfare and the use of human shields have simply been made common in an effort to paint Israel as the aggressor in this conflict. This is simply not the case. The state of Israel is no oppressor. It is in fact a vibrant democracy. On the other hand, the original Hamas covenant calls for the genocide of the Jewish people, and the Palestinian Authority punishes the sale of land to Jews by death. It is patently clear that the world community must not treat these two entities as equal when one side is very clearly on the side of moral good. The United States will not offer support for any solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that infringes upon the freedoms of the Israeli people. That is not to say that we will not pursue peace.
Delegate, please wrap up your speech.
Apologies. We visualize a two-state solution that works for both nations and look forward to working upon that with the entire General Assembly.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have the Delegate of Israel. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable chairs and fellow delegates of the House, good morning. The Delegate of Israel welcomes you to discuss the decades-long Israeli-Palestine conflict, one that the state of Israel is heavily involved in. The state of Israel is a country in the Middle East which primarily identifies itself as a Jewish and democratic state. After the outbreak of violence in the ongoing Israeli-Palestine conflict, which commenced on the 10th of May 2021, although disturbances took place earlier, currently we do have a ceasefire which came into effect on the 21st of May. It is important to note that the state of Israel completely justifies its actions in the past and in the present. Although Palestine has made several attempts to attack Israel, even in the recent months, the state of Israel tries to follow the ceasefire as much as possible unless it directly affects the people of Israel. The state of Israel wishes this dispute to end and has in fact made several efforts to settle this by signing peace treaties with Arab nations and by trying to maintain as much space as possible with Palestinians unless they directly attack our civilians. The Delegate of Israel solemnly requests all member nations of the UNGA to work alongside Israel in order to make a treaty to finally put an end to this dispute. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have Delegate of DPRK.
Thank you, Chair. So the Israel-Palestine conflict has been one of the most enduring, tragic, fierce battles of the world ever. This conflict is an imperialistic struggle between the nations of Israel and Palestine, and it certainly had an impact on the living circumstances of many inhabitants, ruining their tranquility and peace. The escalating violence of this issue has devastated the territories with unbelievable violence, and it has also triggered a humanitarian crisis as human principles and fundamental rights have been ignored and disrespected. It had destabilized the livelihood and resisted the nation's development in various aspects. It was also followed by Israel's tyrannic behavior for colonization, which had disrupted the secure environment for the civilians to reside in, illicit settlements and displacement of Arab communities, displaced and disturbed refugees, and a flagrant violation of several international policies and an aggressive battle for ownership over the city of Jerusalem. It also encompasses—
Delegate, please wrap up your speech.
Sure. So the end of the two-state resolution will inaugurate two contiguous, independent, adjacent states with sovereignty and mutual recognition. And the end of the conflict is only marked when both the nations are recognizing the right of each other to establish their own nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have a Delegate of Mexico. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair and dear delegates, the Israel-Palestine conflict is one that Mexico is deeply concerned about and has always supported in any way possible to achieve peace. The number of lives it has affected is tragic, and Mexico strives for a two-state solution where both states may coexist side by side in peace and security within internationally recognized borders. Mexico has established strong diplomatic relations with both Israel and Palestine and would like to see a peace that is the result of acceptance and compromises by both states and mutual respect in accordance with international law. Mexico is strongly against the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and asked to generously withdraw from this area that the Palestinian population may have a secure homeland as well. Mexico looks forward to a solution that supports the consolidation of an economically and politically viable Palestinian state while also addressing Israel's security concerns and satisfies both parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have a Delegate of Japan. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair and dear delegates, the Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the longest ongoing conflicts after World War II. Conflicts like these leave entire communities devastated long after the hostiles resume. The Middle East peace process is one of the priorities to be solved for the Foreign Ministry of Japan. The nation understands Palestine's long-standing aspiration for state building and supports a two-state solution only through negotiations. To end the chain of hatred and search for a breakthrough, Japan believes that it is necessary for both parties to face each other with determined political will for solving this issue. Japan will continue to play its role whenever possible in providing assistance for confidence building between both parties. The nation looks forward to building a future independent Palestinian state, as well as improving the situation in Gaza. Japan looks forward to the support of the international community beyond the borders for solutions for this pressing issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have Delegate of India. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you for recognition, Chair. A very good morning to the respected Chair, Co-Chair, Rapporteur, and entire Executive Board, press corps, and my dear delegates. As we gather today to debate over a seemingly never-ending problem, the delegate expresses grave concern over the escalating chain of events in the Middle East. Summarizing all our efforts, we take a diplomatic and pragmatic approach to the problem. We acknowledge the right of the Israelis to protect themselves and the self-determination of the Palestinians. Our dehyphenation policy separates our foreign policy from the conflict. Another important statement that we would like to deliver is that Jerusalem is neither the capital of both sides nor the territory. We strongly condemn the rocket firings by Hamas into Israel. The denial of human rights and justice in Israel comes as alarming to the Delegate of India. We have already supported the two-state solution since decades, and reiterating it, the Republic of India fully believes that the two-state solution is the best solution when it is complemented by a good set of compromises against future violence. We hope to see an independent...
Delegate, please wrap up your speech.
Apologies. We hope to see an independent Palestine living peacefully with the country of Israel.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have Delegate of UAE. Delegate, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, delegates, Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, Rapporteur, and my dear press corps. The Emiratis are strong advocates of humanity and brotherhood. We believe in the necessity of harmony and peace in the region of Israel and Palestine, the normalization of relations between all countries. The Israel-Palestinian conflict is a violent fight going on for years that has torn apart the feeling of brotherhood between the two countries. The UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, supports Palestine's cause, the need to have their own state, and also establishes friendly relationships with the country of Israel by agreeing to the Abraham Accords 2020. This puts forward full normalization between the state of Israel and UAE. UAE believes that the restoration of security, peace, stability in the region, and the normalization of relations between all countries, including Israel, can be achieved with the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. This way, Jerusalem is divided between both...
Delegate, please wrap up your speech.
Apologies, Chair. In this way, both communities can live with peace and harmony. UAE, therefore, supports the Arab Peace Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will have Delegate of Belgium. Delegate, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. The Israel-Palestinian conflict is an ongoing dispute till today. As one of the founding members of both the European Union and NATO, Belgium is a determined part in solving various international conflicts, promoting a culture of respect and dignity. Recent years have made the cause of such conflicts perfectly clear and hard to ignore. From the expansions of illegal settlements in the West Bank to the discrimination of both citizens, these factors have become serious obstacles in the implementation of any solution towards peace. Belgium, along with many other nations, strongly believe the two-state solution as it sets clear boundaries and emphasis on the separate Jewish and Palestinian state. Over the years, Belgium has contributed countless times in order to help Palestinian schools, refugees, agricultural projects, etc., such as the agreement in supporting Palestinian youth in the labor market with UNESCO, which is based on providing young men and women with skills that will aid them in the labor markets, and many others. Belgium firmly supports a two-state solution and is certain that if we set time-bound goals, we will be able to solve this conflict for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have Delegate of Canada, who will be the last person, last delegate on this list. Delegate, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, Rapporteur, and delegates. Canada supports Israel's right to defend itself, especially its right to live in peace and security with its neighbors, has been at the core of Canada's Middle East policy since 1948. Although Canada does not recognize Palestine as a state, Canada supports a two-state solution in order to move towards a just and lasting peace. Canada has listed Hamas as a terrorist organization pursuant to the Canadian criminal law and UN Resolution 1373 established in 2001. Canada recognizes the Palestinian Authority as a government entity in West Bank and Gaza. Canada recognizes the Palestinian Liberal Organization as a representative of the Palestinian people. Canada will stand by UN resolutions that are consistent with the Canadian policy in the Middle East, rooted in international law, addresses fairly and constructively the obligations and responsibilities of all parties involved in the conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. So this is all for the first round of GSL. We will have a second round of GSL now for the delegates who couldn't speak. So delegates who couldn't speak in the first GSL may raise their hands. So Delegate of Netherlands, Delegate of Brazil, Delegate of Australia, Delegate of UK, Delegate of Greece, Delegate of Turkey, Delegate of Sweden, Delegate of Argentina, Delegate of DPRK, Delegate of South Korea, Delegate of USA, I believe you have been recognized in the first GSL. This is a round for the delegates who couldn't speak. Thank you. And Delegate of Austria. So this is going to be the final round for the opening GSL. And we will begin with Delegate of Netherlands. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair and fellow delegates. 16-year-old Nadine Awad, an Arab citizen of Israel, was killed when a Hamas rocket fired from Gaza hit her home in central Israel. People who knew her said that she was a very talented, special girl who wanted to become a doctor and heal the world. Nadine represents one of the thousands of children who were victims of the Israel-Palestine conflict. This conflict has not only resulted in numerous deaths, but also denied the inalienable rights of Palestinians for over a century. Netherlands strongly supports the two-state solution and believes it's the only viable and long-lasting solution for this issue, which will have to be brought about by negotiations. The terrorism of Hamas, which is a threat to both Israel and innocent Palestinians, should be dealt with paramount importance. To promote peace, the rights of the Palestinians, especially women and children, should be protected. Netherlands will continue to assist both Israel and Palestine by participating in the peace conferences and through projects focusing on economy and reconciliation. We should all set aside our differences and stand together to put an end to this violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We now have Delegate of Brazil. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Fellow delegates, respected chairs and press corps, a very good morning. As members of the same world, it is only fair that each one of us work hard and together to improve the peace, growth and prosperity of the entire human race. In regards to Israel-Palestine conflict, we, the Federal Republic of Brazil, condemn the recent series of conflicts that broke out and also the denial of human rights. The Israel-Palestine conflict is intense, controversial, complex and violent. Effective negotiations between the parties must lead to a two-state solution with Palestine and Israel living side by side in security and within internationally recognized borders. Now is an important time for the international community to act and help both sides come to an agreement that will lead to peace. The continuing conflicts makes everlasting wounds on people of both sides. It has a significant effect on both countries' prosperity and unity. Taking into consideration the above mentioned points, We emphasize on a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine, and we are ready to extend our help to do so. Respected chairs, fellow delegates, thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Now have a Delegate of Australia. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the recognition. Taking regard the foreign policy of the Commonwealth of Australia, the delegation strongly backs a two-state solution, and its development cooperation with the Palestinian territories can be considered as a demonstration of its practical and genuine commitment to the Palestinian population, while remaining committed to a two-state solution. But it has come to the notice of the delegation the unfair and bigoted targeting of the state of Israel in the United Nations and in other multilateral institutions by ironically some of the world's worst violators of human rights, including the Arab Republic of Egypt, where the government has illegally or unlawfully detained journalist Tawfiq Nanem for merely doing his job. Yesterday marks Mr. Nanem's 6th month in prison. The Republic of Turkey, where the Kurd minorities enjoy minimal human rights and where numerous politicians face imprisonment. Selahattin Demirtas is the primary example. He has been in prison for 5 years, and the People's Republic of China, where its Uyghur population faced the strictest and most brutal of persecutions, it sometimes even lead to death. And these delegations, respected chair, have over the years expected the committee to exonerate Palestinian militant groups like Hamas, whose ruthless pursuit of violence has caused.
Please wrap up your speech. Thank you.
So driven by the above premises, the delegation expects all parties to focus on a return to negotiations, leading to a just and durable peace agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll have Delegate of UK now. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Respected Executive Board and fellow delegates, the Israel-Palestine conflict dates back years and is one of the world's long-lasting disputes. Tensions between the Jewish and Arab people had begun to escalate since the British left Palestine in 1948, leaving the two ethnicities at loggerheads to build their own national identities. At present, Israel is under the threat of the Hamas for their mere existence and is being punished to death just for buying land by the Palestinian government. The recent Gaza attacks had taken 11 Israeli lives and a number of Gazan lives as the terror group Hamas continues to unabashedly use children and innocent people as a shield. This is an extremely disturbing and dehumanizing attempt at making Israel the assailant. Immediate action must be taken as more and more people lay victim to this terror, ready for disposal at any time at the hands of the Hamas. The United Kingdom believes in a two-state solution and hopes for the Palestinians and Israelis to reach a compromise for the sake of the future generations. We look forward to negotiations for a just resolution for both parties, carefully considering the militant organization of Hamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll now have Delegate of Greece. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for your recognition. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and delegates. We must not give up on the right of Palestine to exist, just as we must protect the right of Israel to exist in peace and security with its neighbors. I start with these words addressed by former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Greece has traditionally supported the Palestine people. The contribution to UNRWA's most important and essential services, including education and health, that provides assistance and protection for millions of registered Palestinian refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and occupied Palestinian territories. Healthy Greece has always negotiated for lasting peace settlements and supports a two-state solution based on the relevant UN Security Council resolutions by establishing a sovereign and viable Palestinian state. This two-state solution leads to two sovereign states that can live side by side, a Palestine that is sovereign and viable and that exists with a secure Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll now have Delegate of Turkey. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to all present in today's session on the agenda of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The ongoing tension in the Israel-Palestine region is a matter of utmost importance, which must be addressed as soon as possible. The region has been in a state of conflict even before the United Nations was formed. Turkey shares a centuries-long joint history and has a close and cultural and social bonds with the people of Palestine. The Turkish Republic supports the need for Palestine, for their own state and all Arab nations in the region to come together and help liberate Palestine. Turkey also supports the efforts of the state of Palestine to be recognized as a state in the international forums. The people of Israel have been oppressing the Palestinians for a long time, and this has led to the loss of many lives, especially on the side of the Palestinians. To be exact, 5,590 deaths on the side of the Palestinians, while 250 deaths on the side of the Israelis. We must send peacekeeping troops to this region to ensure and protect the safety of the civilians who live in this region and to prevent any unnecessary loss of life in this region. That's it.
Thank you, Delegate. We will have Delegate of Sweden. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Delegate. Good morning, Delegates and fellow. Good morning, Chair and fellow delegates. For many years, Kingdom of Sweden has been vocal about the fact that Middle East peace has been at a crossword, and at every crossword, there is a choice to be made. The Kingdom of Sweden continues to maintain its stand of two-state solution and acknowledge the effort of new state of Israel in improving living conditions of Palestinians in Gaza. However, the Kingdom of Sweden expressed deep concern over the continuing violence in the area by Israeli settlers and appealed to respect international humanitarian law and international human rights law and plead to take urgent steps to de-escalate situation prevailing in the area. Our commonly agreed destination is as clear as ever. Two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security with Jerusalem as their capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll have Delegate of Argentina. Delegate, you have the floor.
Good morning, my fellow delegates and the chairperson. The greatest concern conflict in the world should be the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Many lives are going day to day, but at the end of the day, life is the one thing which matters. Hamza, the terrorist group, used lots of rockets and attacked Israel. In answer to it, Israel flew airstrikes on it, which kills 29 people and nine children, including 9 children, which is not fair. At the end of the day, lives only matter. So the two-state resolutions can bring an end to the conflict, where everyone can live peacefully and expect better generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have a Delegate of South Africa. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the recognition. Good afternoon, respected Chair and my fellow delegates. Seeing the losses that both Israel and Palestine suffered in this bloodshed war that caused good for no one, the Republic of South Africa gets reminded that the escalating situation in Israel and Palestine affirms once more what South Africans know too well, that intractable conflicts can only be solved through peaceful negotiation. As lovers of freedom and justice, we stand with the Palestinian people in their quest for self-determination, but also in the resistance against the deprivation of their human rights and the denial of their dignity. The continued occupation of Palestinian land and the suffering of the Palestinian people is a blight on the conscience of humanity. Only through negotiations that end the occupation and create a viable two-state solution on the basis of UN resolutions, international law, and mutual agreements, with Jerusalem recognized as an international city, can we hope to bring a definitive end to these senseless and costly cycles of violence. South Africa feels that UN and fellow delegates should take immediate actions at the earliest so as to ensure peace among both communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll have Delegate of South Korea. Delegate, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the recognition, Chair. The Republic of South Korea believes in staying neutral. We believe that this conflict has been going for several decades, and it has become something of a tragedy. We believe in supporting the UN, but we do not want to advocate violence, neither want to participate in it. We believe that giving land to Palestinians is the right solution, and we advocate the two-state solution. That's it, and I would like to conclude my votes.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now have our last speaker, the Delegate of Austria. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you. Respected Executive Board and fellow delegates, the Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the world's longest-running conflicts since 1948. At present, the condition of the West Bank is deeply saddening. According to the UN Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, as of October 19, 2020, Israeli authorities demolished 568 Palestinian homes and other structures in the West Bank, including in East Jerusalem, displacing 759 people. Austria has long been involved in the Middle East peace process and has closely worked with the Palestinian government and the UNRWA in the fields of health, water management, and environment. Austria believes that the two-state solution is the only viable solution to put a rest to this conflict.
Austria also sympathizes with the Israeli government for the attack on their territories by the militant group Hamas and extends their support for the same. The Republic of Austria promotes peace above everything and hopes for the adoption of a fair resolution to put a rest to this continuing conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegates, now we will be stopping for a while. We'll have a lunch break. So we'll begin again at 1 p.m. Please report back by 12:55 and we'll see you. So you may leave now, or you can stay here. It's fine.
Mr. Chair, are we moving out of a MUN session and into something somewhat casual?
No, Delegate, we'll be having a lunch break. So
All
you
right.
may leave, or you may you may do whatever you want. It's fine.
All right, gotcha. Thank you,
Right,
Chair.
see you.
Good afternoon, delegates. How are we? Doing good?
Right, delegates will resume shortly, so please be ready. Yes, and delegates, please rename yourselves to the country representing. Right, delegates will wait for 1 more minute. Delegates, can you please rename yourselves? So we have some, you can see that some delegates haven't changed their name. For example, 1920356 Shashank, please just rename yourself. And also Amrita, please just change your name.
1 second.
Okay, so seeing that all the delegates are here, so welcome back, delegates. This will be the second session of the day. And now the floor will be open for any motions. Are there any motions on the floor? Yes, Delegate of India.
The delegate proposes a motion for a moderated caucus on the refugee crisis with a total of 10 minutes and 1 minute per speaker.
Point of information, point of personal privilege, Mr. Chair.
Sure, delegate.
The delegate, please repeat that. The internet broke or something, and the delegate couldn't hear the topic of the motion.
Sure, Delegate of India, please repeat your motion.
A moderated caucus on the refugee crisis with a total of 10 minutes and 1 minute per speaker.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of UAE.
Delegate of UAE proposes a moderated caucus on the topic Future of Jerusalem with a total time of 20 minutes, 1 minute per speaker.
Delegate, if I heard correctly, it's 30 minutes.
Okay, Chair.
Delegate, is it 30 minutes? What is the time limit?
The total time limit is 20 minutes, Chair.
20 minutes and individual speaking time?
1 minute per speaker.
Noted. And Delegate of USA?
Chair, the delegate would like to raise a motion to speak on contemporary factors contributing to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for a time period of 20 minutes, allocating 1.5 minutes per speaker.
Delegate, could you make the title of the motion a bit shorter, if possible?
Okay, sure. All right. Modern factors for the conflict.
Modern factors for the conflict?
Yeah. Or modern exact. Really, the whole name describes it better, but let's shorten it. No problem, Chair.
Sure. Delegate, can you text it in the chat?
Yeah, the topic, right? Sure. Absolutely.
Right, you may send it to me. I'll forward in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, Delegate. A delegate, I believe, I'm not sure what country you're representing. Deepa. Thank you. Could you please rename yourself?
Yes, there's a small technical glitch. Actually, I've renamed myself, but I don't think so. It's reflecting.
Right. So, Delegate, what is your motion?
The delegate of Democratic Republic of People's Korea would like to propose a moderated caucus with a total time of 10 minutes with individual speakers time 1 minute per person on the topic Israel's annexation of water resources.
Delegate, can you repeat the topic?
Israel's annexation of water resources.
Noted.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll be moving into the voting procedure for the first moderated caucus brought forward by the Delegate of India, which is to discuss the refugee crisis with total time of 10 minutes and individual speaking time of 1 minute. Are there any objections to this motion? If not, we'll be moving into voting procedure. Delegates in favor of this motion?
There are a point of personal privilege.
Yes, Delegate.
Will you repeat what you said right now?
Delegate, we're moving into voting procedure, and we're asking for delegates in favor of the motion brought forward by yourself. So delegates who may wish to vote in favor of this motion may raise their hand. It can be done by selecting the reaction tab in Zoom. So be giving 10 more seconds. So this motion clearly fails. We'll be moving on to the second motion brought forward by the Delegate of UAE, which to discuss the future of Jerusalem with individual speaking time of 1 minute and total speaking time of 20 minutes. So delegates objecting this motion? All right, so delegate, moving to voting procedure. Delegates in favor of this motion? Just to clarify, we need 13 votes for a motion to pass because there are 25 delegates present here today. We'll be giving 20 more seconds. Delegates in favor, please raise your hands. It's the moderated caucus brought forward by the Delegate of UAE to discuss the future of Jerusalem with a total time of 20 minutes and individual speaking time of 1 minute. And also just a reminder, delegates, if you have any chits, please text the rapporteur, Arjun. He will be taking care. Right, so this motion clearly fails. We'll be moving forward to the third motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA to discuss the contemporary factors contributing to the conflict with of a total time of 20 minutes with individual speaking time of 1.5 minutes per speaker. So delegates in favor of this motion? Delegates in favor, please raise your hands. So just to clarify, we need 13 votes for a motion to pass. And all delegates are...
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Delegate.
Due to technical glitches, I was out of the meeting for a couple of seconds. So what is the motion you're talking about?
Right now, we're discussing the third motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA, which is to discuss the contemporary factors contributing to the conflict with a total time of 20 minutes and individual speaking time of 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, so seeing that we have 13 votes, we're moving into the fourth motion, which is brought forward by the delegate of, I believe, DPRK. So we will be putting the third motion on standby, so we'll just wait. The delegates in favor of this motion, which is Israel's annexation of water resources, of total time of 10 minutes and individual speaking time of 1 minute. So delegates in favor. So clearly this motion fails. So the motion which was brought forward by the delegate of USA is an act. Delegate of USA, would you like to speak first, last?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak first.
All right, delegate.
Delegates.
All right.
Previously, during the general
delegate,
speakers list, apologies, have I been
will be
recognized?
delegate will be asking delegates who wish to speak on the GSL first.
Right,
And
apologies.
you may, not an issue. Delegates wishing to speak on a GSL. So delegate of Italy, delegate of Israel, delegate of Germany, delegate of UAE, delegate of Japan, delegate of Australia, delegate of India, delegate of DBRK, delegate of South Africa. And I believe that's everyone. All right, so delegate of USA, you have the floor for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Delegates, we observed in the previous general speakers list that so many of us referred to the actions of the Israelis, to the actions of supposed colonial, but the delegate would like to mention this. So many of these delegates who mentioned a supposed Israeli colonialism, they spoke of this oppression, but they didn't mention terrorism. The conscious deployment of a double standard directed at the Jewish state and at no other state in the world, the willingness systematically to condemn the Jewish state for things others are not condemned for, this is not a higher standard. This is a discriminatory standard. And discrimination against Jews, that has a name as well. The word for that is anti-Semitism. Delegates, the delegate is quoting Charles Krauthammer, but Charles Krauthammer could have been speaking about this General Assembly as well. It is critical that we buck the trend of the United Nations having an anti-Zionist tilt, and we work together for an equitable solution instead of unilaterally, instead of unopposedly condemning Israel. Thank you.
Delegate, you have 30 seconds left. How would you like to yield your time?
Delegate would like to yield it to the floor for comments and questions.
All right, delegates, are there any comments on the delegate of USA speech?
Point of personal privilege.
Yes,
I couldn't hear the last half of the delegate's speech.
A delegate from which part exactly?
The final sentences.
Delegate of USA, could you please repeat the entire speech so that it's clear for everyone?
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Delegates, we observed in the previous general speakers list speeches that many delegates mentioned a supposed colonialism, a supposed oppression, but these very same delegates never mentioned the terrorism that Hamas and other organizations have perpetrated. Why must the state of Israel be held to this standard? The conscious deployment of a double standard directed at the Jewish state and at no other state in the world. The willingness systematically to condemn the Jewish state for things others are not condemned for. This is not a higher standard. This is a discriminatory standard. And discrimination against Jews, that has a name. The word for it is anti-Semitism. These words were spoken by Charles Krauthammer, but he could have been discussing this meeting as well. It is important that we buck the trend and we stop continuing this legacy of the United Nations having an anti-Zionist tilt and instead work towards an equitable solution that works for us all.
So Delegate, was it clear?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Are there any points on the Delegate of USA's speech?
Chair, I would like to raise a point of information.
Sure, Delegate.
Of USA. Honorable Delegate of USA, you talked about terrorism. Then can you please consider what your country has, what opinion your country has on the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister who was trying to bring peace was assassinated because of his attempts?
Point of order. Use of personal pronouns.
Delegate, please let the chair take care of that. Thank you.
Apologies.
And yes, Delegate of UAE, please refrain from using personal pronouns.
Apologies, Chair. Delegate of United States of America, what opinion does your country have on the basis that the Israeli Prime Minister was assassinated after he tried to bring a peace attempt by the Israelis themselves?
Could the delegate repeat that last part? By the Israeli what?
By the Israeli extreme right-handers.
The United States stance on terrorism, on assassination, on extrajudicial killings is single, it is clear, and it has never wavered. The point is we do not support this kind of assassination. It is a stain on the international legacy of these people to commit something like this. But that doesn't mean that the Jewish state did this. That doesn't mean that Israel did this. There are always going to be members of the internal community that do this. The difference is when it's state-sponsored. Israel is not a state sponsor of terror, but the delegate can refer to other countries that are. In addition, the delegate believes that in order to prevent things like this, we must work together while keeping in the interests of our nation's people. Too far, we have had elites from both nations speak to each other and chart out their own plans, but it is critical that we pursue a solution that the people too choose. Thank you, EB and the delegate of the United Arab Emirates.
Is that everything, Delegate of UAE? If you have any follow-up question, you may send us a chat.
Okay, Chair.
Sure.
I have a request to follow up.
Sure, you may follow up by private chat. You may text the rapporteur and he will send it to the respective delegate. Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Next speaker on the list, we have Delegate of Italy. Delegate, you have the floor.
The Republic of Italy would like to say the following. Terrorism, religion, and other beliefs are believed to be the cause for the ongoing conflict. We need to mitigate the tension between the two countries, ensuring that the terrorism ceases. Convincing every individual about the two-state solution on both sides is crucial in order to attain true peace. And with regards to the two-state solution, we need to draft one such that it equally splits land resources such as valuable metals, water, etc., and also equal amounts of land for farming and cultivation between the two countries, again to ensure that conflict doesn't arise between the two peoples. Reviewing these factors in previous resolutions and discussing which of them is best and whether we need to draft an entirely new resolution in the following sessions is highly suggested by the representative of the Italian Republic. With that, the delegate would like to rest his case.
Thank you, Delegate. You have 25 seconds left. How would you like to yield your time?
Yield back to the chair.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. So next we'll have Delegate of Israel. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you. When dealing with a conflict, going back to its root causes are extremely important. This conflict emerged from the intracommunal violence in mandatory Palestine between Israelis and Arabs from 1920 and has erupted into full-scale hostilities in the 1947-48 civil war. The Jews needed a homeland, and that became Israel. Right from the beginning, the Arabs were against Israel being a country. It is quite humorous to note that around 70 decades later, Hamas, now considered a terrorist organization by most nations in the European Union, still has supporters. Israel has always supported our Jews present in our nation, and our primary interest has always been protecting our civilians, even if it's at the stake of launching missiles right back at Palestine. Groups like Hamas still refers to Israel as the Zionist entity. They do not acknowledge the legitimacy of the state of Israel or the Jews have any ties to the land. Furthermore, in the previous GSL, several countries have mentioned about how Israel has done all of this so that it gets more land. Again, if you look back at history, you can find that most of the leading nations have done this, and just singling out Israel for this
Delegate,
is
please wrap up your speech.
clear hypocrisy, and this is not acceptable at all.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on the Delegate of Israel's speech? Yes, Delegate of DPRK, followed by Delegate of Turkey.
Yes, the delegate would like to question the delegate of Israel on
Delegate,
point
which
of
point?
information.
All right, Delegate.
The delegate had mentioned that everything that Israel has done, including all its acts of terrorism, missiles, and destruction and elimination of Arab communities, was to defend its own civilians. So how does Israel define Israeli settlements and invasions over Palestinian occupied territories, which is already recognized, considered by international communities and the United Nations?
Delegate of Israel.
Thank you. And thank you, Delegate, for your question. Firstly, to notify that our primary cause has always been to protect our civilians, like the delegate had mentioned in her speech. And for invading, it is essentially because it is funny that Palestine has not yet recognized the fact that Israel is now a complete democratic state. And for this purpose, if we are attacked, we would have to go and invade into their land to let them know that we are not weak and that we can protect our own territory. This is done.
Request to follow, Chair.
Please let the Delegate of Israel finish their speech.
Yeah, so the state of Israel has just done this in a way so that it can increase their power and let Palestine know that we are not weak and that we have the capacity to protect our civilians at all times.
Okay, Delegate, Delegate of DPRK, are you satisfied? The
Request to follow up, Chair.
You may follow up in private. Thank you. Delegate of Turkey, do you have a point?
Yes, a point of information.
Sure.
Okay, so the state of Israel mentioned that groups like Hamas has been conducting terrorism, but back in 2014, you launched another operation called Operation Protective Edge, which killed or injured more than 20,000 Palestinians just for the murder of 3 Israeli citizens. Do you have any reason to justify such an operation?
Thank you,
yeah.
Turkey. So regarding this, as you had mentioned in your question itself, 3 of our civilians, it doesn't matter about the number of civilians who were actually injured. The fact that they launched a mission to attack our civilians, whether it's 3 or whether it's 20,000, it doesn't matter. They started it, and it is quite important to let them know that we do care about our civilians. This is not just about a fight for power. This is about protecting our people. And they should have definitely considered the fact that we have a well-developed army, and that attacking us would have been a very terrible choice from their part.
Will that be it, Delegate?
No, I would like to request a follow-up.
Sure, Delegate, you may follow up in chat. Delegate of USA, do you have any point? Delegate of USA?
Right.
Mr. Chair, would it be possible for the delegate to offer a comment on the speech by the Delegate of Israel?
Actually, delegate comments will be granted only if there's some time remaining in the given speech.
All right, that's understandable. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Chair.
Right, so seeing that there are no points remaining, we'll be moving to the next speaker. So Delegate of Germany, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. Several religious factors pertinent to Islam and Judaism dictate the role of religion as the main factor in the conflict, notably including the sanctity of holy sites and the apocalyptic narratives of both religions, which are detrimental to any potential for lasting peace between two sides. Extreme religious Zionists in Israel increasingly see themselves as guardians and definers of how the Jewish state should be, and are very stringent when it comes to any concessions to the Arabs. On the other hand, Islamist groups in Palestine and elsewhere in the Islamic world advocate the necessity of liberating the holy territories and sites for religious reasons, and preach violence and hatred against Israel and the Jewish people. If we take a closer look at the permanent status issues, borders, security, mutual recognition, refugees, the Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and the issue of authority over Jerusalem, we find that the last two are directly linked to the fates of Jewish people and the Muslim people around the world. The original ownership and authority over Jerusalem are highly contested due to the presence of holy sites for Christians, Jews, and Muslims in the city. This conflict is also deeply rooted in history, in which Jerusalem has been attacked 52 times, captured and recaptured 44 times, besieged 23 times, and destroyed twice. With this, let me conclude. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on Delegate of Germany's speech? Yes, Delegate of USA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the delegate to the Federal Republic of Germany join the United States of America in condemning those nations who seek to reduce the Israel-Palestinian conflict to a tally of civilian casualties?
Delegate, what point is it? Is it
It's a point of information.
Sure.
Right.
Delegate, can you repeat your point of information?
Yeah, would the delegate for the Federal Republic of Germany join the United States in condemning those nations which choose to reduce this conflict to a simple tally of civilian casualties?
Chair, can we answer through the chats?
Sorry, Delegate. Can you repeat that?
Chair, can we answer through the chats? Can we?
Reply with chits, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Delegate, you may send a message to our rapporteur. Thank you.
Chair, could you repeat the question through the chat, in the chat box?
Right, Delegate of USA, you may send this question to the Delegate of Germany by chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, seeing Delegate of DPRK, do you have a point?
Point of information.
Granted.
So the delegate of Germany had mentioned that the main root or cause or the foundation of the conflict is like very much dependent on religions. So though religion has been one of the aspects which have hindered the peacemaking process, it was not completely there. There were violations of human policies, so there were many social, economical, and political aspects to be considered. And also that though Israel is concerned about religious aspects, Palestinians are not very much concerned about the religions and have not centered their obligations on religions. They have centered it on their right to establish their own nation. So that directly contradicts what the delegate of Germany had did. So does the delegate has anything to reply?
The delegate of Germany would be answering to the chats.
Thank you.
Delegate. All right, seeing that we don't have any more points, we'll be moving to the next speaker. That's Delegate of UAE. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Many problems and reasons are why the Israel-Palestinian conflict is now in motion. The first of them is violence. Both the sides have heavily inflicted violence. The UAE has approached the Hamas and asked them to stop and remain and keep the calm of the region intact. thereby asked them to either stop receiving the funds from the UAE or keep the calm of the region. On the other hand, by agreeing to the Abraham Accords 2020, UAE has also established a very friendly relation with Israel, which means the full normalization between both the countries, and it has also pressurized Israel to stop its side of violence. The second point is of the religious and the religion between the two communities. Jerusalem is a holy spot. It's a holy spot for the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews, and it must be shared. The two-state solution, which the UAE agrees to, says just that East Jerusalem will be given to Palestine, and the West Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel. In this way, Jerusalem is shared, and the conflict is also going to dissolve a little bit. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Delegate, you have 17 seconds remaining. How would you like to yield your time?
2 comments and questions, Chair.
Sure, Delegate. Are there any comments on the Delegate of UAE's speech? Yes, Delegate of DPRK.
Delegate had also yielded their time to questions.
The delegate as Delegate of UAE, have you yielded your time to comments or questions?
I'm sorry, Chair, let me be more clear. I've yielded my time to questions.
All right, we'll entertain questions. So Delegate of DPRK, do you have any questions?
So the delegate had mentioned about Jerusalem being shared between both Israel and Palestine. So having taken into account the amount of violence, amount of rebellions, the amount of disagreements, and the kind of crisis which is happening right now, would it be a wise option to share Jerusalem between two nations, which has had like the most fierce global battles? Wouldn't that provoke more crisis, and wouldn't that provoke more violence? Though sharing Jerusalem would be a respect for both the humanitarian policies as well as the obligations of both the states, wouldn't that complicate the issue further or cause further rebellions in the future? So would shared government be a wise choice to make?
Chair, I request to reply this question.
Sure, Delegate, you're being granted, of course.
Yes, okay, Chair. Delegate of Korea, if we take away Jerusalem totally from this conflict, then it would be very unjust because both the communities, this Jerusalem is a very holy site for them. Instead, when we share the Jerusalem, we must, of course, inflict strict control over this city to prevent any such fights between the two communities. This would help save and respect both the communities while also bringing in harmony between the Israelis and Palestinians.
Request to follow up, Chair.
Actually, Delegate, we don't accept follow-ups for questions. We only accept follow-ups for, yeah, right. Next, we have Delegate of Australia. Do you have any questions?
Yes. How can the delegation mask itself as an advocate for human rights and secularism, and it's a known fact that the United Arab Emirates frequently violates human rights, especially amongst the fraternity of journalists? I can give, the delegation can give an example if that's necessary.
Right, Delegate of UAE?
Yes, please give me an example, Delegate of Australia.
The unlawful conviction of the Jordanian journalist Taisir Najjar, who later succumbed to the effects of torture and mistreatment while serving prison in the United Arab Emirates. How would the delegation like to comment on that?
Can you please give me a date when this happened, Delegate of Australia?
The journalist succumbed to death last year, but it happened, the imprisonment happened 2 years or maybe 3 years back. He had to face an imprisonment of, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years. Then was sent back to Jordan, original country.
Okay, Delegate. The UAE enforces strict laws on such crimes, and therefore it must take action on such things, or else there would be no control over the country.
But
it strongly opposes.
Chair, can the delegation reply?
Delegate of Australia, let the Delegate of UAE finish your speech. Thank you.
Sure.
So I was saying that the UAE must control such things. They must enforce strict law and conduct when it comes to such activities. So So it was therefore right to do so.
Delegate, just a reminder not to use personal pronouns. Delegate of Australia, if you have any, are you satisfied
That
with
doesn't
the...
give the United Arab Emirates the license to unlawfully convict a journalist for just criticizing the nation, criticizing how the nation functions, how it treats its citizens.
Delegate, unfortunately, we don't allow follow-ups for questions. You may follow up a point of information or a point of information you may follow up, but you cannot follow up a question. If you'd like to have a point, you may raise it later.
It was not a follow-up, rather a reply, I'd say. The delegation would say.
Right, the delegate, we don't allow that.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of USA. Delegate of USA.
Right.
Do you have a question?
EB, apologies, my internet is a little weak. The delegate would like to ask the delegate for the United Arab Emirates, does the delegate believe that their remarks are consistent with the stance espoused by the UAE through the Abraham Accords signed between the United States and the United Arab Emirates?
Delegate of America, can you please rephrase the question?
EB, would the delegate be allowed to respond?
Sure, delegate, repeat your question.
To rephrase this question, does the delegate for the United Arab Emirates believe that their remarks on Israel and Palestine throughout the course of this committee are consistent with the stance espoused by their government by signing the Abraham Accords?
May I reply, Chair? Right.
Sure, delegate.
Yes. So yes, the delegate of America, the UAE, had signed the Abraham Accords, and it believes that there must be peace between Israel and Palestine. It both supports Israel, it supports the normalization of Israel as well as the cause of Palestine.
Thank you, Executive Board.
All right. So, other Delegate of India, do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair. Both the Haram al-Sharif and Temple Mount are located in the East Jerusalem. Both the sides are convinced of the eviction of the other group in Jerusalem. Could the delegate of the UAE justify how unity can be brought about in Jerusalem if it is a shared capital? Is the UAE ready to mediate on the issue?
Delegate?
Yes, Chair. Strict control must be enforced on Jerusalem to prevent such often conflicts. But apart from that, if Jerusalem is taken out of the picture entirely, Delegate of India, it would cause even further conflicts because Jerusalem is a really holy site for both the communities. It would be disrespectful to take out Jerusalem entirely.
All right. Thank you, Delegate.
Can I follow up?
Delegate, you may not follow up a question. You can follow up a point of information. Are there any points on Delegate of UAE speech? Delegate of India, you have a point?
Yes, Chair.
Granted.
Delegate of UAE, what are your views on having Jerusalem as international territory so that people of both the sides can access it equally?
Yes, Delegate, that is also possible. But whose control would Jerusalem be on then? Would it be Israeli or Palestinian state? Or would it be controlled by an outside power? That would be even more disrespectful because that region belongs to both the states. You cannot, apologies. An exterior power cannot control it as it has a special significance for both the communities.
Delegate of India, if you have any follow-up questions, you may text him by chat.
Okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll be moving on to the next speaker, Delegate of Japan. Delegate, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. Japan believes that there are numerous factors contributing to the modern situation of the conflict. However, the delegate would like to discuss the topic that the United States of America brought up. Japan believes that anti-Semitism is a security issue for Jewish communities and individuals in regions across the world, and this ideology has a profound impact on the whole society, undermining democratic values and human rights. Japan thus acknowledges that and encourages international organizations and governments to face up their responsibilities to protect their Jewish citizens, since this is also an important concern that plays a part in easing the tensions and restoring confidence for both parties. However, the nation would also like to mention that it firmly believes is against any violent acts, and that both parties should maintain a durable ceasefire agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. You have 30 seconds. How would you like to yield your time?
To comments and questions.
Delegate, you may choose either comments or questions.
Questions.
All right. Are there any questions on the delegate for the Delegate of Japan on their speech? Any questions, Delegate of USA?
Thank you, Executive Board. What is the Delegate of Japan's stance on the allocation of Jerusalem? As in, would the delegate agree with solutions proposed by other delegates regarding splitting the policing of the region? Or would the delegate agree with the United States in that the region of Jerusalem is best allocated to the state of Israel?
Delegate of Japan.
Yeah, thank you. Japan believes that Jerusalem should be shared, preferably that East Jerusalem would be the capital of Israel and the West Jerusalem would be part of Palestine. Japan does understand the significance of the place in both for both communities, and this is why they choose to say so. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Delegate. Delegate of India, do you have a question?
Yes, Chair. So will the Delegate of Japan elucidate on how the compromise to a ceasefire can be agreed upon? Because recently Israel and Palestine agreed to a ceasefire, and under that Israel agreed to stop Jewish settlements in Sheikh Jarrah, but this was not agreed upon.
Delegate of Japan.
The Delegate of Japan would like to mention this previous statement that that these problems should be solved through negotiations instead of violent attacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Now I have a question from Delegate of Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Delegate, I have a doubt. So, sorry, the Delegate of Israel has doubt on how exactly does the delegate believe that a ceasefire can be achieved? Do you have any methods? Because like how the Delegate of India said, last time it did not work well, and it hasn't been working well for several decades. So does the delegate have any ideas on how to sort this issue out?
May I answer?
Sure, Delegate.
The Delegate of Japan does not have any specific solutions to the problem, but through discussions in the General Assembly and Security Council, Japan believes that a solution could be made.
Right, Delegate of DPRK.
Yes, Chair. So my question, Delegate of DR, the question I would like to ask the Delegate of Japan is regarding the Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territories like West Bank and East Jerusalem. So despite constant notifications from the United Nations that such forms of colonization is unlawful and against international policies, Israel has continuously tried to annex and colonize occupied Palestinian territories like West Bank and East Jerusalem. And it has justified their action, stating that Palestine is not a recognized state as of now. So what is Japan's stance on the same, and any resolutions you would like to propose to prevent a conflict from further complicating?
The government of Japan deeply deplores the continued settlement activities by Israel, despite the repeated calls for freezing such activities. Japan strongly urges the government of Israel to prevent the approval of construction plans and to freeze settlements. Japan urges Israel and Palestine to exercise restraint and refrain from provocative actions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll be moving on to the next speaker now, Delegate of Australia. You have the floor.
Thank you for the recognition, sir. As formally mentioned, it has come to the notice of the delegation the unfair and bigoted targeting of the State of Israel in the United Nations and in other multilateral institutions by some of the world's worst violators of human rights. And these violators, respected chair, have over the years expected the community to exonerate Palestinian militant groups like Hamas, whose ruthless pursuit of violence has caused numerous civilian deaths on both sides. Furthermore, Palestinian citizens have to pay a huger price for its violent actions, the price of misrepresentation. This is the primary issue acknowledged by the delegation. Due to this, the delegation of Australia would like to back the defensive actions of the State of Israel, especially after the series of events which took place the preceding year and even the killings executed by the Hamas over the previous week. To back the point more, the delegation would like to point out the involatility in the West Bank area where the Hamas has only a smidge of control. But if it comes to the delegation's notice that the actions of the State of Israel undermine the prospects of a two-state solution, the delegation makes clear its concerns, condemning the actions while doing so. Thank you. The delegation would like to yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. All right, so we have the next speaker now, Delegate of India. You have the floor.
Religious differences are not the sole cause of the conflict. In fact, the major fight is for land. Several factors have contributed to the formation of the problem, and newer factors continue to fuel the problem. We believe that unilateral action from these sides is a major factor that causes violence. We urge both sides to completely refrain themselves from unilateral action in response to violence. We propose immediate escalation to the United Nations in case of any action of terrorist natures. The expanding Jewish settlements in occupied Palestine are a major obstacle to viable solution as land division becomes tougher. The BDS protests are denounced by the Republic of India. The penetration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, especially in the holy month of Ramadan, was a great matter of shock for the Republic of India, whose fair number of Muslim sentiments were heard. Under the compromise to cease fire between Palestine and Israel, the State of Israel agreed to stop Jewish settlements in Sheikh Jarrah, but this wasn't carried out. The differing views of Hamas and PLO are a major concern as the Hamas ideologies are targeted to the destruction of Israel. We oppose the Hamas's actions and stand by Israel. The formation of a democratic government in Palestine shall help in easing tensions greatly. India welcomes all efforts which are aimed at strengthening the collective commitment of the international community to resume direct negotiations and facilitate the peace process. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on the Delegate of India speech, Delegate of USA?
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Granted.
In November 2010 of 1970, a United Nations resolution called Zionism, a form of racism and discrimination. The United Nations held their first ever conference on fighting anti-Semitism in 2015. Barely half of the 193 member states attended the meeting, which was planned 4 months ahead of time so that many members would be able to attend. In this light, with the continuous track record of the United Nations having at the bare minimum a anti-Zionist tilt and at the worst systemic anti-Semitism, how can the United Nations be trusted to handle disputes between a hypothetical Palestinian state and the state of Israel fairly?
I have a point of personal privilege.
Sure, Delegate.
I could not hear the Delegate of USA completely. I believe there was an internet problem.
Yes, Delegate of USA, can you repeat your point of information?
Delegate Mike, the United States question was, with several examples of the United Nations exhibiting at least anti-Zionism and at worst anti-Semitism, how can the UN be reliably trusted to fairly mediate on disputes between Israel and a hypothetical state of Palestine?
We would call all nations to come together and tell what are their views on the topic. I believe the United Nations works in a fair way and we all should abide by that.
Permission to follow up?
Sure, Delegate. You may do it by Chit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Delegate of DPRK, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. So the major foundation for this whole problem was not about religion, it was not about land, it was about imperialism, power, and superiority. And those were the aspects which had certainly complicated the peacemaking process and acted as a crucial determining factor in the establishment of the two-state resolution too. And Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian territories, which was a flagrant violation of international policies, had also triggered to complicate the issue further, and Korea urges for a complete freeze of Israel's expansion activities as it is prohibited to colonize preoccupied areas. And moreover, the humanitarian crisis was triggered because of offending basic privileges like access to essential commodities and Israel's several attempts to evict the Palestinian communities by unlawful annexation of water resources, discrimination, violation of human privileges too. Talking about Jerusalem, when we govern Jerusalem using a shared government, there are a lot of questions which keeps arising, and also keep having reminded that the foundation for the problem was about colonization. When establishing Jerusalem with a shared government, it will lead to more sorts of imperialistic approaches to colonize the whole Jerusalem instead of maintaining the peace and harmony. Jerusalem needs to be considered as an international territory with an autonomous government. This respects and considers the obligations of both the sides too. And regarding the safety, security, and welfare of the civilians there, all the extremists from both Hamas and as well as Israelis need to refrain from involving in action with terrorism and brutality.
Delegate, please wind up your speech.
Yes, apologies. Both the sides need to refrain from engaging in actions of destruction, brutality, and inhumanity, as violence cannot be justified under any circumstances. And the establishment of the two-state resolution would provide mutual recognition, sovereignty, and establish law and order. Thank you.
Are there any points? Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points for the Delegate of UAE speech? Sorry, DPRK speech? Yes, Delegate of USA.
Thank you, EB. The Delegate of the United States would like to ask the Delegate of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, why would the delegate support an internationally governed region of Jerusalem? Do the people of Jerusalem not have a right to self-determination? Do they not have the right to elect their own government and rather have the government of another nation or another set of nations imposed upon them? Would that not be imperialism?
Delegate of DPRK.
The delegate answer. The point which we have to notice here is that Jerusalem is a significant determining factor in the peacemaking process. And that has had several oppositions during the peace agreements and negotiations too. We have to take into consideration that even when we share Jerusalem, meaning even when Jerusalem is being governed by a shared government, it is attracting or it's vulnerable to many approaches of imperialism. In the sense, again, it will lead to land annexation, colonialism, rebellions, and again, it will lead to further crisis, and it will lead to casualties, violence, which cannot be justified under any circumstances. So when Jerusalem is being considered as an autonomous territory, it would provide both the civilians with unhindered access to its holy places, so its human rights are being respected and considered. It would also prevent many future rebellions on borders, on other questions about colonialism and annexation. It would put an end to all those questions, and that would be a key to sustainable national security and peace.
Permission to follow up?
You may do it by a Chit, Delegate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate of Israel, do you have a point?
Point of information.
Granted.
Delegate, you'd mentioned in the beginning of your speech, stating that the entire conflict is based on a war for power and superiority, right? And that it was not done for land or for religion. So does that mean that your country does not believe that anti-Semitism is being conducted? And does your country support terrorism and acts and validates the acts done by Hamas?
Delegate of Israel, just to point out that in the United Nations, we don't use the word terrorism, we use the word non-state actors. So please keep that in mind. Thank you. Delegate of...
The delegate reply? Yes.
Sure, Delegate.
My reply would be that the delegate of Israel has misunderstood the point made by the delegate of North Korea. The point which was established here is that is not only the major role which is being discussed, that is not the crucial determinant. So there are many other aspects which is an obstacle in the peacemaking process, and North Korea does not mean to justify the illicit acts of either Hamas or the Israeli government or either of the violations which is happening right now. It means that the intention of the Israelis to expand their country and for their own natural growth and development is being a determining factor there. And it is also accompanied by the Palestinian determination to establish their own nation. And we also need to consider that the Palestinians' right to establish their own nation is even before when Israel was recognized as a country by international communities. So what the North Korea would like to highlight the point that not only religious, social aspects needs to be valued during the peacemaking process, and other aspects like borders, settlements, and privileges also needs to be valued.
Right to follow?
Delegate might follow up by Chit. Thank you. Next, we have Delegate of South Africa. Delegate, you have the floor. Sorry, Delegate of France.
Thank you. France believe anti-Semitism.
Sorry, Delegate, do you have any point of personal privilege or something similar? Because now South Africa is going to speak.
Well,
the delegate of South Africa actually requested to be removed from the general speaking list. And
sorry, Delegate, you have been removed. So yeah, Delegate of France, now you may now have the floor. Apologies.
Thank you. France believe anti-Semitism and blasphemy is the key factor contributing to this conflict. Anti-Semitism, hatred towards Jews has become highlighted since the late 20th and 21st century. It rose during the Second Intifada or Al-Aqsa Intifada when Palestinian uprising began against Israel. Well, the Foundation for Political Innovation, Fondapol, found that 77% of Jews and 53% of the general public believe that the anti-Jewish hatred is on the rise, and blasphemy-related issues had led to many casualties in the recent past. Well, what's the solution? Passing laws on anti-Semitism and blasphemy which would preserve the rights of any particular ethnicity and would respect their religious values and prevent people hurting other groups and would unite the people of France. As expected, Israel has laws which prohibit insulting and revealing religion, offending religious sensibilities, and destroying, damaging, and desecrating a place of worship. However, the law governing blasphemy is vague and poorly implemented. Well, uniting Semitism and Zionism, which France tried earlier, we would like to rebuild it and enforce the CNCDH, which recorded that the anti-Semitism activities are very large in number. So implementing strong laws on anti-Semitism and blasphemy is the only way to come out of this issue. Thank you.
Delegate, are there any points on Delegate of France speech?
I would like to yield it to the board back.
Delegate, actually you don't have any remaining time. So we can't yield your time. But after every speech, we actually ask for points, and which you may choose to reply or not reply. So it's okay. So are there any points?
Delegate of the French Republic stated that they strongly condemn anti-Semitism. So are there any laws banning the BDS movements in France?
Yes, France does have a law which unites the anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which was developed in the recent, and in France, the population is relatively 5 lakh to 6 lakh people belong to Jewish community. So obviously France have law on anti-Semitism and Zionism uniting.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Delegate of India.
Thank you. So now we'll be moving to the final speaker in this list, which is Delegate of Canada. Delegate, you have the floor.
Pursuant to the Canadian criminal law, Hamas has been listed as a terrorist organization. Israel is facing an enemy that has no respect for human rights or democracy or rule of law. Hamas stores missiles in hospitals, mosques, and kindergartens. While Hamas uses human shields to protect their missiles, Israel uses their missiles to protect their citizens. Hamas's rockets has no distinction between Arabs, Israelis, Indians, or anyone else who gets in the way and the rocket hits them. In the past, the rockets that were launched into Israel killed 90 people, which were 83 Palestinians and 7 Israelites. Thank you. I yield back to the chair. Canada yields back to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on Delegate of Canada's speech? Delegate of Turkey.
Point of information.
Transit.
As you've stated, Hamas is a terrorist organization, but that only belongs to the small region of the Gaza Strip. What is your view on the PLO-controlled West Bank?
Just a second, Delegate. Again, we remind everyone to not use the word terrorism, but the word non-state actors.
Apologies.
Not an issue. Delegate, your reply.
Canada recognizes the Palestinian Authority as a government entity in Palestine, and Canada also recognizes the Palestinian Liberation Organization as a representative of the Palestinians.
Will that be it, Delegate of Turkey?
Yes.
Now we have Delegate of UK. Delegate, you have the floor.
Looking at the recent events that happened in the region of Israel and Palestine, without any provocation, Hamas fired rockets into civilian population of Israel. If not for their strong anti-missile defense system in which they use the Iron Dome, there would have been a lot of civilian casualties on the Israeli side as well. Such actions forces Israel to defend themselves. Even just yesterday, one Israeli tourist was killed near the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. There will naturally be retaliation from the Israeli side, which will lead to casualties. Hamas is using these civilian casualties as a method to get foreign funds from sympathizers. How can Israel be painted as the assailant when all they have done is protect their own people? Instead of trying to blame one side, we should work together against this terrorism and the false ideas which Hamas tries to impose. The only way out is for the international community is to work along with Israel and Palestine for more peace talks and to unify against the Hamas and eliminate this threat which provides to be an obstruction in the pathway towards peace. Thank you.
Delegate, 2 points. Firstly, please don't use the word terrorism. We mentioned it before, not an issue. And how would you like to yield your time?
I would like to yield my time to the chair.
Right, thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on the Delegate of UK speech? Delegate of USA?
Point of information, Chair.
Granted.
Would the delegate for the United Kingdom agree with the delegate of the United States that the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah were an overblown domestic issue amplified by groups with vested interests, and that under Article 2, Section 7 of the United Nations Charter, the United Nations has no business meddling in such a thing such as land reacquisition at this smallest level of scale?
Yes, I do agree with the delegate of United States of America on that.
Will that be it, Delegate of USA?
I'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Turkey?
Point of information.
Granted.
So the Gaza Strip is a region controlled by the Hamas, which has been defined as non-state actors. It has now been blockaded by the Israelis on all sides to prevent necessary resources from getting into the region of the Gaza Strip, starving and killing various innocent civilians. They only survive through the help of the United Nations. Why hasn't the United Kingdom done anything to stop, to prevent Israel from doing such inhumane actions in the Gaza Strip?
Delegate, just a reminder, when you're asking a point of information, you may please refer to any part of the Delegate of USA's speech and ask a question regarding the speech. So would you like to withdraw your point of information? Would you like to?
My point. I'll withdraw the delegate's point of information.
Understood, Delegate. Thank you. Delegate of Israel?
Point of information.
Granted.
Does the delegate of UK believe that Jerusalem should be solely given to the state of Israel, or should be equally split amongst Israel and Palestine?
Sorry, again, Delegate, could you please refer to any part of the Delegate of UK speech and while framing your question.
So the delegate will withdraw.
Right, thank you, Delegate. All right, so now the GSL has been exhausted and the floor is open for any motions. Sorry, Delegate of India, do you have any point?
No, Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. So now the floor is open for motions. Are there any motions on the floor? Yes, Delegate of USA.
Motion to move into an unmoderated caucus for a time period of 20 minutes.
Delegate, can you repeat the total time period?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. All right, are there any other motions? If not, we'll be moving to voting. Delegate of India.
A moderated caucus on solving the Hamas and Fatah disputes with a total of 15 minutes and 15 speakers.
Delegate, what's the individual speaking time?
1 minute.
1 minute. And could you repeat the topic?
Solving the dispute between Hamas and Fatah.
Delegate, can you please text the topic in the chat or to our rapporteur, and he'll be sharing it to everyone.
Yes.
Thank you. So in the time being, we'll be moving into voting procedure for the first motion, which is an unmoderated caucus for the time period of 20 minutes. Delegates in favor? Delegates against the motion? Also, just a reminder for motions, all the delegates have to vote and cannot abstain from voting. Sorry, can delegates against the motion please raise your hand? Delegates against? Because we're seeing that 15 delegates has voted for the motion, but no delegate has voted against the motion, despite having 25 delegates in the conference. So we must redo the voting procedure again. So for the first motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA, delegates in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Delegate of Brazil, are you in favor of the motion or are you against the motion? Since you raised your hand and lowered it too.
Actually, I'm in favor of the motion.
Right, Delegate, you may keep your hand raised.
Okay.
And delegates against the motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA. So we will put on standby the voting procedure right now, and we'll move on to the second motion, which was brought forward by the Delegate of India. Delegate of India, could you please text the topic to rapporteur?
The topic has been typed.
Right, sorry, rapporteur, there was a delay. Delegate for a moderated caucus in solving the Hamas and Fatah dispute. So delegates in favor of this motion. Individual speaking time 1 minute and 15 minutes total time. Delegates against the motion. So the second motion clearly fails. We'll be moving into a non-moderated caucus for a time period of 20 minutes. So Delegate of USA, would you like to create a block? And
Executive Board, would it be possible for the EB to create breakout rooms for?
Right, exactly. Delegate will be creating breakout rooms. So could you please text the list of the countries in your block?
Absolutely. Would you like it through WhatsApp or Zoom?
Or actually, WhatsApp is favorable. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. One moment. Also, everyone, I'm glad to see this level of debate. We should keep moving forward on this, right? Like, I know all of us have our own personal as well as national preferences on this matter, but we can work together. I've seen everyone is in support of a two-state solution. Okay, we might disagree on dividing Jerusalem, but we can figure that out. We can get that done. So let's look towards this with a kind of positive mindset, with an optimistic mindset. And my phone number is in the WhatsApp group. So in case any of you have anything you want to like text and just say, okay, Delegate of the United States, what do you think about this? I'm going to do this. Do you want to work together? Just reach out and I'd be glad to work with you, no matter who you are. Mr. Rapporteur, I texted the chair with a list of delegates for the block. If
Yes,
there is
Delegate,
anyone else who would
I'll be
like-
adding.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is to the rest of the committee. If there is anyone else who is interested on working on a solution to this matter that actively takes the rights of both the Israeli people and the Palestinians into account, then please feel free to reach out on my WhatsApp or send a chit, and I'd be glad to add you.
All right, so the concerned delegates have been invited to join the breakout rooms. Delegates, have you received the invite? Delegates, I'm seeing that some delegates haven't renamed themselves, so please, delegates, do that. Right, welcome back, delegates. Just had a 20-minute unmoderated caucus session, and now the floor is open for motions. Are there any motions on the floor? Are there any motions on the floor? Yes, Delegate of India.
A motion for a moderated caucus on other solutions to the problem except the two-state solution.
Delegate, can you repeat the topic?
Other solutions to the problem except the two-state solution.
Yeah, Delegate, please text the topic in chat.
Okay, Chair.
1 second, Delegate of India, can you repeat the individual speaking time and the total time?
A total of 15 minutes and 1 minute 30 seconds per speaker.
That is an order, Delegate. Delegate of USA, your motion.
EB, if the Delegate of India would be willing to amend her motion to change it to 20 minutes with 1.5 minutes per speaker so that more people may be recognized.
Delegate of India, would you like to change your speaking time?
The Delegate of India agrees to it.
Delegate of USA, can you change, could you repeat the speaking time?
20 minutes, 1 minute 30 per speaker.
Noted. Yeah, Delegate of Australia.
Yes. The Delegate of Australia proposes to suspend formal debate and move into a moderated caucus of a total of 20 minutes with an individual speaker's time of 60 seconds to discuss about possible initiation of a collaborative relation between the state of Israel and the future state of Palestine.
Just a second, Delegate. So possible initiation of?
Collaborative measures or collaborative relations.
So collaborative, maybe initiation of collaboration between
the state of Israel and the potential state of Palestine in subjects like military.
Right. Right, so are there any other motions? Or seeing none, we'll be moving to voting procedure. So firstly, are there any objections on the motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA? Sorry, by the Delegate of India? Seeing none, we'll be moving into the voting procedure. Delegates in favor of the Delegate of India's motion?
Chair, could I raise a point of personal privilege?
Yes, Delegate.
Due to technical issues, I wasn't able to hear what the topic is. So could the delegate please repeat what the topic is?
Delegate, it's in the chat. So the first motion was brought forward by Delegate of India, which is the topic is alternate solutions for a conflict other than the two-state solution, with individual speaking time of 1.5 minutes and total speaking time of 20 minutes. And the second motion was brought forward by the Delegate of Australia, which is possibly initiation of collaborative measures between Israel and Palestine, with 1 minute of speakers time, individual speaking time, and 20 minutes total time. So I hope that's clear, Delegate. So now we are asking for delegates in favor of Delegate of India's motion. Delegates in favor? So delegates against the Delegate of India's motion? We'll be putting the motion on standby. I'll be voting on Delegate of Australia's motion. There's possible initiation of collaboration between Israel and hypothetical state of Palestine, with individual speaking time of 1 minute and total time of 20 minutes. Are there any objections to this motion?
I object.
So one objection. Moving to voting procedure. Are there any delegates in favor of this motion? Delegates in favor of Delegate of Australia's motion?
Point of personal privilege, could the chair repeat the motion?
Of Delegate of Australia?
Yes.
So possible initiation of collaboration between Israel and the hypothetical state of Palestine. So the second motion clearly fails. We'll be moving ahead with the Delegate of India's motion. Delegate, would you like to speak first, last?
Delegate would like to speak last.
Noted. Delegates wishing to be on GSL, raise your hands. Delegate of USA. Delegate of Israel. Delegate of India, but he'll be last. Delegate of DPRK. Any other delegates wishing to speak? Seeing none, we will start with the GSL. Delegate of USA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Executive Board. The United States had mentioned this in the prior unmoderated caucus, but it is, the United States believes that it is necessary to utter these words on the floor of the General Assembly. It remains without a doubt that the animosity that is fostered between the people of Israel and the people of the Palestinian entity, it does not go away. It will not go away just in the snap of a finger, which is why the creation of two separate nations stands to destabilize the region. Let us suppose, for example, that we split it similar to India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan were split, one nation predominantly Hindu, the other nation predominantly Muslim. And they have continued to share a dislike practically and an anathema for each other. And that is something that we should be aware of when we discuss the two-state solution for Israel. Now, the United States remains in favor of the two-state solution, but this animosity and ways to ameliorate it are things that this General Assembly must consider if we are to look at alternatives to the two-state solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. You have 30 seconds left. How would you like to yield your time?
Yield it to the floor for questions.
Sure. Are there any questions on Delegate of USA speech? Delegate of India?
So, Delegate of the United States of America, recently, under Trump administration, there was the deal of century. Could you elucidate on that, or how would it help as an alternative?
The permission to respond?
Yes, Delegate, granted.
While the current administration and previous administration have their differences, it does remain without a doubt that this deal is a milestone in relations between the UAE, the United States, Bahrain, and Israel. And so this deal, if the delegate is to elaborate, would basically list out a set of conditions for a two-state solution. The United States believes that it is a robust framework within which to work on a two-state solution, but is willing to negotiate and to deliberate with the delegates in this General Assembly, specifically the delegate for the State of Israel, and if possible, a representative for the Palestinian people, to fine-tune this solution and really make it implementable.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate of Israel, do you have a question?
The delegate of the United States mentioned about how the two-state solution didn't work. So replacing that, what would you suggest would be a
point of personal privilege? The delegate didn't hear anything you just said. It really just cut out.
Oh,
so if you can repeat.
Please repeat, Delegate.
The delegate of the United States had mentioned about how the two-state solution wouldn't work out as well. So replacing that, what would you think would be a much better alternative that could really be beneficial at this point of time?
Permission to respond?
Granted.
The United States remains committed to the two-state solution. The delegate was simply listing a possible shortfall of this solution and believes that we should take this shortfall and really orient our strategy within this General Assembly around that problem, so we can, take everything into account. Let the delegate reiterate that we are indeed in favor of the two-state solution as outlined by the Abraham Accords.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on the Delegate of USA speech? Seeing none, we'll be moving into the next speaker, Delegate of Israel. You have the floor.
Thank you. The delegate of Israel believes that the two-state motion, although might be effective initially, may not be 100% effective. Exactly like how the delegate of USA had mentioned in a speech, the future of Israel and Palestine will be such as India and Pakistan, if not worse. Firstly, what we would need to sort out as the members of the United Nations General Assembly is with regards to the borders. The way the two lands have been divided initially is in such a way that it looks like different parts of a jigsaw puzzle. Instead of returning to the 67 border idea, which was drawn at the end of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, it should be like what the President Obama had said. The borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on how the 1967 lines were, but with more mutually agreed swaps, which could actually help resolve the issues between Israel and Palestine.
All right, stated delegate.
Yes, thank you.
How would you like to yield your time?
20 points.
Would you like to yield the time to questions, comments,
Yeah.
or back to the chair? Comments?
Yeah.
Sorry?
2 questions.
Questions. Are there any questions for the Delegate of Israel? Republic of India?
Delegate of the State of Israel, what about the permanent Jewish settlements in West Bank?
Delegate?
Can I apply?
Yes, sir.
So what the delegate of Israel believes is that at this particular point of time, maybe we should let the people who live there decide how whether they'd want to go to the Israeli side or to the Palestinian side. As the delegate had mentioned in her speech, this would be a mutually agreed swap and not taken forcefully. So it would be taken into consideration of what the people want and what the two governments want as well.
Chair, could I raise a point of information?
Yes, Delegate.
Delegate of the State of Israel, under the Oslo Accords, there was a compromise on the Jewish settlements that the Jewish settlements would go into Israel and the places where there are no Jewish settlements would go into Palestine. But in that case also, it looked like a jigsaw puzzle. So how would you solve that problem? Because
Delegate, you raised a point of information, right?
Yes.
So, could you please refer to any part of the Delegate of Israel's speech that you probably haven't understood or have questions about?
Yes, Chair. The delegate of the State of Israel said that the compromise would be based on the 1967 borders. So based on that only, we had the Oslo Accords and it was like a jigsaw puzzle. How would the delegate deal with that?
Delegate?
Yeah, so in that manner, firstly, what we need are well-kept borders that would distinguish the difference between the two lands. Sorry for that. Yeah, and in that manner, it could resolve the jigsaw. Moreover, in another way, what we could do is that we could ask, perhaps request if what both the governments want and their people, which would again lead to a better well-kept borders, which is not as much as in a jigsaw way as it appears to be at this particular point of time.
I would request to follow up.
Sure, Delegate, you may follow up by Chit. And Delegate of DPRK, do you have a question?
Yes, Chair.
Sure.
The delegate of Israel had mentioned regarding the 1967 borders, but the United Nations and also many international communities have recommended the pre-1967 borders, as only those borders are recognizing Palestine as an individual state and will be providing a distinct state for their own community. So the 1967 borders itself does not recognize or distinguishes a separate land for Palestine. So how would adapting to the 1967 resolution be a key for any peace or settling disputes between the two?
Okay, firstly, Delegate, it is important to note that even at this particular point of time, Palestine is not a state yet. That's extremely important to note. Secondly, if we follow the 1967 borders, then again, there's like a clear differentiation between those two parts. If it's in the initial pre-1967 borders, it looks more like a jigsaw puzzle where it's not quite evident. There might be people who have families stuck in the other side and they have to cross an entire country to reach their family, which is not actually quite feasible at the point.
Thank you, Chair.
Delegate, Delegate of USA, you have a question?
Thank you, EB. Point of information. Why are we concerned in the first place about a jigsaw? We all saw with the example of West and East Berlin that this linear or almost linear division, it simply wasn't practical. Even buildings were chopped in half. So why are we worried about a jigsaw when the more natural accommodating pattern for a border would be a jigsaw?
Delegate, would you like to reply?
Yeah. So yeah, following the natural borders would be fine. However, the issue of jigsaw was actually quite concerning in the early past, which is actually how it led to such a huge issue between the two nations in the first place. And yeah, if we follow the natural path, we can sort out many issues. However, if we sort out the issue of Jigsaw, things would be more ordered, and it would be much more easier for the people to find out which part they belong to.
Delegate, are you satisfied?
Yeah, I think that while the delegate thinks that while this issue is something that should be further discussed, the delegate's response is sufficient at this moment.
Sure, Delegate. If you have any questions, you may follow up by chat. Thank you. Are there any points of information on Delegate of Israel's speech? Right, seeing none.
Delegates, delegates, just to note, out of the EB's discretion, we will be adding a few countries to the speakers list. Delegate of Mexico, Delegate of Belgium, Zimbabwe, Austria, and Canada, you've been added to the list.
Right, thank you, Vice Chair. So now we'll be moving on to the next speaker, Delegate of DPRK. You've been recognized and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Though there are alternative resolutions for the two-state resolution, the Palestinians have been protesting and rallying for decades, more than a decade old issue. So they have been protesting for establishment of a distinguished independent sovereign state. So which means that any other alternative resolutions, though they can provide individual land allocation to them, it will not be recognized as a distinct state. So which is exactly what they not want. So it is not appeasing the requirements of Palestine. And moving on, taking into consideration the point made by the delegate of United States of America, whether the both nations, the future nation of Palestine and Israel would become enemies and it would become as disastrous as the current state of India and Pakistan. Once post the establishment of the two-state resolution, there can be collaborative measures taken and other relaxations on the compensations, penalties, or reparations part to maintain a smooth relationship between Israel and Palestine and to make sure that no other rebellions are arising in the following decades, which is going to lead to more crisis and global conflicts. Moving on, other resolutions like Trump's deal of the century and one-state resolution have received opposition from both the sides, both Israel and Palestine. And Trump's deal of the century seems to be more one-sided and favorable to Israel and a little harsh on Palestine, in terms when we see like it is cutting off the funding of USA to PLO and many other things like that. And moreover, the one-state resolution has not secured many votes or recommendations or preferences when we compare it or keep it in a comparison with the two-state resolution, which explicitly implicates that—
Delegate, please finish your speech.
Yes, so which explicitly implicates that it is not as successful or it's not as impactful and effective as a two-state resolution. So sticking on to the two-state resolution would settle the disputes is what the delegate of North Korea would like to conclude.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on Delegate of North Korea's speech? Delegate of USA?
On point of information, the delegate of North Korea very concerningly mentioned reparations. How would this play out? Who would the reparations be paid to? Would it be going from the former Israelis to Palestinians? Would Arab Israelis be forced to pay reparations? Why should we pursue reparations at all? Would that not be an excessively inflammatory proposal for a topic so delicate such as this?
Delegate of North Korea?
Point of personal privilege. There was a technical glitch with the delegate. Point of information. So the delegate repeat.
Delegate of USA.
Could the delegate repeat? I didn't hear what the DPRK said.
Delegate of DPRK, can you repeat your question?
Oh.
Your point of privilege?
All right. Wait, who should repeat now?
Delegate of DPRK is supposed to repeat. Yeah, Delegate of DPRK can repeat the point of personal privilege.
Could the delegate of USA repeat their question again?
Delegate of USA, could you just repeat?
Sure. The delegate of the United States question is that we noticed that you said the word reparations in your remarks just now. And so that is gravely concerning. So who would these reparations go to? Are they going to go from Israelis to the Palestinians? Are they going to go from Jewish people to Muslim people? Are Palestinian Jews going, or Palestinian Jews going to have to pay this? Are Arab Israelis going to have to pay this? So, and would it not be needlessly inflammatory to even mention reparations when this topic is so delicate? And how would reparations serve to fix this animus between these two communities, rather than, would it not split them apart further?
Permission to answer?
Delegate of, yeah, you got granted.
The word reparations is used as a compensation for all the destruction, damage, and wrongs inflicted upon on either sides of them. Though we have to really take into consideration the smooth relationship or the allies between Israel and Palestine, we have to accept the fact that there have been many violation of policies, there have been many injustice, unlawful acts which have been executed by both the sides. Let it be militant incursions, violence, or either of those actions does deserve some kind of a consequence, and it definitely had an impact on the civilians of both the sides, both Palestine and Israel. So, though the execution of reparations could complicate the smooth relationship between Israel and Palestine, there's definitely a need for it, as we have to really see how far the conflict has escalated in terms of violence, in terms of humanitarian policies and other aspects. So there needs to be some kind of reparation or compensation or aid, assistance provided to both of them to revive back from the kind of destruction caused by both of them. And it can also be used to develop the nation in other aspects. So reparation does not only mean to be like a penalty to make right what they've done before. It could also be as an aid, which is going to affirm both of them a smoother relationship in the future.
Delegate of USA, if you have any follow-up questions, please text them in by chat. Sure. Delegate of Israel, do you have any point?
Point of information.
Granted.
Again, delegate, it's regarding the word that you use, reparations. So regarding that, when you talk about giving aid, right? That's what you mentioned some time ago. So in that manner, from what time period are you going to consider this? Because as we know, the Israeli-Palestine conflict's been going on for the past around 7 decades. So from what period of time are you counting the destruction? What if there's something that we are not yet aware about? And how exactly, in what manner are we going to solve it?
Permission to answer?
Sure, Delegate.
Now, the reparations, aid or assistance, whatever I've been talking about, it should be a part of the negotiations and agreements part of it. So in the peacemaking process, this can also be included. And taking another aspect of it, the time, it needs to be justified from both the sides, or it needs to be backed up with proper evidence or the reason why they need it. And it need not have to be too harsh or too strict on both the sides, as the whole peacemaking process is aiming on ending the conflict and not developing another conflict. So it need not have to be harsh, but then it can be used as an economic support, which both the nations can use to further develop their country in economic, social, political, and other aspects, and revive back from the destruction caused by the the violence of this issue.
The delegate wants to clarify something.
Delegate, you may do it by chat.
Okay.
Yes, Delegate of USA.
The delegate would like to ask regarding the talking about the creation of a new conflict with the forced imposition of
Delegate,
monetary levy.
you may ask. You may ask the delegate by chat. Thank you. So now we have Delegate of India. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Leaving the two-state solution, the most common second alternative shall be the one-state solution. India would like to see the Jews and Arabs living as equals if the one-state solution is implemented. We would encourage special privileges for the minority and protection from exploitation by the majority. However, we would also like to draw attention to the unrealisticity of the one-state solution. Reviewing the current situation after the 1967 war and two violent intifadas, the people of Israel and Palestine have grown larger differences among each other, which makes it tough for them to accept one another as equals. Israeli politics is dominated by hatred to Palestine, and there is little hope that true political equality can be achieved under the one-state solution. Moreover, the Arabs rejected the 1947 UN partition plan because they did not want Jewish settlements in their area. Nevertheless, we can also draw inspiration from the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. The struggle ended with an united South Africa where both the whites and the blacks lived together equally despite the various clashes of the past. Other than this, we would also throw light on other peace efforts like the Arab Peace initiated by Saudi Arabia, Deal of Century by USA, Geneva Accord, China's peace plan, etc. The Republic of India supports any peace plan that can be implemented well and accepted by both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
I would like to
Sir Delegate, can you repeat that?
I would like to yield my time to comments.
Sure. Are there any comments on Delegate of India's speech? Are there any comments? All right, seeing none, are there any points on the Delegate of India's speech? Yeah, Delegate of DPRK.
The delegate of India had mentioned about the one-state resolution and
Delegate, could you specify which point you'd like to
point
bring
of
forward?
information.
Granted.
The delegate of India had mentioned regarding the one-state resolution and its advantages and how and other examples which had a similar ending. But then we also have to take into consideration the obligations of the Palestinians, right? So the Palestinians have been rallying, protesting for the establishment of their own nation for such more than a decade, not even a decade, for a long period of time. So as like a symbol of respect which is provided to their obligations, rights, it would be more effective and more feasible if we could establish the two-state resolution rather than getting the one-state resolution, which would not be a respectful answer or a response to their obligations.
Could I answer, Chair?
Yes, Delegate.
Delegate of the People's Republic of, Democratic Republic of Korea, the delegate believes that she had already stated it, that after the 1967 war and two violent intifadas, the people of Israel and Palestine had grown differences among each other. The delegate also stated the disadvantages of the one-state solution, and in this way, we also hinted towards the two-state solution being more viable than the one-state solution.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll entertain one last point from Delegate of France. Delegate.
Delegate of India, in the current building crisis, how do you think they can implement the one-state solution? Because in the past, you can see in the years 1981 and 1992, when the prime ministers of Israel, Anwar Sadat and Yitzhak Rabin, were assassinated in this idea of creating a one-state where they wanted to make the peace process. What is your go on this?
We believe that a democratic government in Palestine would help in this process because right now Palestine is divided over Hamas and Fatah. Fatah is having non-violence approach to the problem, whereas Hamas is using violent practices. We would believe in the demilitarization of Hamas by urging the Islamic Republic of Iran to stop smuggling or giving weapons to Hamas.
Could I follow up?
Delegate, you may follow up by it. Delegate of Turkey, unfortunately, we ran out of time. We're going to have a break for 15 minutes. So we resume the committee at 3:30 with the point by Delegate of Turkey on the Delegate of India speech. So, right, delegates. So I'll see you at 3:30.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Point of personal privilege?
Yes, Delegate?
And never mind, because I just wanted to make sure my audio was working. So I just said,
All right, Delegate. So I think we can resume the committee. Like I said last time, we'll be starting with the Delegate of Turkey's point on the Delegate of India's speech. So Delegate of Turkey, sorry, Delegate of Turkey, could you please say your point?
Actually, I'll retract that point. I mean, the
Delegate.
delegate retract that point.
Sorry, Delegate?
The delegate will retract that point. Yep.
Noted, Delegate. So are there any points of information on the previous Delegate of India's speech? Right, noted. So now we'll be moving on to the next speaker, which is joining the committee. Delegate of Australia. I believe you're the next speaker now.
Yes, sir. Can I get a minute?
Sure, Delegate.
Can delegation get a minute?
Delegate, are you going to speak now?
Yes, yes, sir.
You have
Thank you
the
for
floor.
the recognition. The delegation reiterates its support for a two-state solution as it acknowledges not just the interests of both the factions, but also understands for a fact that a two-state solution would ameliorate relations across the Middle East, thus restricting the room for more conflicts. And the key issue that should act as an adhesive for the future states would be to tackle serious issues like religious extremism and militant uprisings, specifically in and around the Gaza Strip. But if the committee decides on a one-state solution, one that is obviously not endorsed by the Commonwealth of Australia, then the delegation would also like to strongly oppose the removal of the settlements in and around the West Bank, which is another issue raised by delegations of other countries, as it would be in accordance with international laws if a one-state solution is passed. So the committee must bear in mind the consequences of a one-state solution before it jumps into conclusions. Therefore, the delegation would like to yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points? Are there any points on the Delegate of Australia's speech? Seeing none, moving next to the next speaker, which is the Delegate of Mexico. Delegate, you have the floor.
Point of personal privilege. Can
Yes,
the
Delegate.
delegate speak at the end?
Sure, Delegate.
Thank you.
I'll put your name. Okay. So next speaker will be Delegate of Belgium. Delegate, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So rather than talking about the two-state solution, Belgium is going to talk about the few steps that can be taken in order to remove major obstacles that block the path to peace. I am so sorry, but my camera seems to have a problem. If that's okay. Yeah, thank you. So resettlement and rehabilitation of Palestinian refugees in the future Palestinian state or in the current country of residence is a realistic solution. The European Union must take a lead on this and move forward with a resolution to make this possible. Guaranteed money for refugees could also allow them to think practically and use this option and resources to the best way possible. And following that, as said before, settlements have become a huge obstacle that has prevented the two-state solution from being executed. To prevent further expansion, we must set time-bound and futuristic goals, such as, for example, say in 5 years, the problem of settlements would be resolved by having international supervision to secure borders and establish territorial boundaries. This could prevent expansion and slowly calm the situation on the ground as well. We might have to be more decisive and prioritize while we move forward, or else we'll just spawn the same paradigm over. Yep, thank you.
Delegate, how would you like to yield
the chair.
extra time? Thank you. Are there any points? Yes, Delegate of Israel.
Point of information.
Granted.
Thank you. So the delegate of Israel's point of preparation towards Delegate of Belgium is that in your speech it mentioned about the European Union to make a resolution. Why exactly would the delegate want the European Union to make the resolution rather than including several other member states from the General Assembly? Any particular reasons for?
Not necessarily. We can include everyone. That was just an entity rather than having the UN, since there were conversations about that being a problem.
Oh,
another international organization. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Delegate of USA.
All right, thank you, Executive Board. Delegate of Belgium, how exactly would supervision of the settlement region solve the problem? Because this is obviously very, very complicated. Generations of world leaders have come before us, and generation of world leaders will be after us on trying to figure out how to, deal with settlements. So how would international supervision of the settlements actually lead to a solution to this problem?
Can I? Yeah, okay.
Delegate here.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. When I meant international supervision, I mean, when the delegate of Belgium meant international supervision, what was implied was supervision over the borders. Say the problem is settlements going over the West Bank, right? So to make sure there is that border and to prevent is what I meant. And the delegate of Belgium believes that international supervision would solve this problem pretty well. It's that. Yeah, is that what
Delegate of USA, are you satisfied?
While I disagree with the conclusion, I accept the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to follow up,
I will be.
Thank you.
By chat. Are there any other points on the Delegate of Belgium's speech? Right, seeing none, we'll be moving on to the next speaker, Delegate of Zimbabwe. Delegate of Zimbabwe. So we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Austria. You now have the floor.
Thank you for the recognition. Respected Executive Board and fellow delegates, the Middle East has long presented a focal point of Austrian foreign policy interest. Austria has long been involved in the Middle East peace process and has supported EU's policies. Austria also supports the two-state solution and believes that it is the only just resolution viable to put a rest to this ongoing conflict. The Republic of Austria and the EU considers that the future Palestinian state will require secure and recognized borders and hopes for an agreement on the borders of the two states based on the 4th June 1967 lines. The Republic of Austria hopes for negotiations leading to a just resolution and for all member states to work towards a two-state solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
To the chair.
All right. Are there any points on Delegate of Austria's speech? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Canada. You now have the floor.
The Delegate of Canada mentioned that the Delegate of Canada does not wish to speak on this Caucus topic.
Actually, Delegate, in the best interest of the committee, we'd like some delegates to speak. If you'd like to have more time to talk, to plan out your speech, you may have it. So it's not an issue.
Yeah.
Delegate of Mexico, are you ready?
Chair, the delegate of Mexico as well asked if the delegate could speak on the next topic.
All right, Delegate, so we'll be removing your country's name. And Delegate of Canada, I believe you share the same view as Delegate of Mexico.
Yeah.
Right. So GSL is exhausted, and now the floor is open for any motions. Are there any motions on the floor?
Motion.
Right, so we'll begin with Delegate of USA. Delegate, what is your motion?
The delegate of the United States would like to raise a motion to enter a moderated caucus for a time period of 25 minutes, allocating 1.5 minutes per speaker on the topic of the allocation of the region of Jerusalem.
Point of personal
Sorry, who is this? Delegate of DPRK, yes, granted.
Could the delegate repeat the topic?
The topic is the allocation of the region of Jerusalem. Yeah, it's in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. The next motion is from Delegate of Israel. Delegate.
The delegate of Israel had the same mod topic as the delegate of US.
So we can withdraw. Delegate of India.
A moderated caucus on the topic. Chair, could I have a minute?
Sure.
Yes, Chair. A moderated caucus on the topic, a brief history of the land, and to investigate and see who is the rightful owner.
Delegate, can you repeat the topic?
A brief history of the land, and to investigate and see who is the rightful owner.
Delegate, can you text the topic to a rapporteur? He'll be sharing it to the public. Thank you. Delegate of Australia, what is your moderated caucus?
Should it be a moderated caucus?
That was a
Motion for
mistake. That was a
non-moderated.
mistake. So, apologies, it was a mistake from the chair. What is your motion?
Motion for non-moderated caucus of 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Right, and Delegate of DPRK, what is your motion?
Motion to move to a question answer session with the delegate of Israel with a total time period of 6 minutes and a total question.
Delegate, can you repeat the time period?
Minutes.
Sorry? Delegate, you're not audible.
The delegate of Korea said 6 minutes, Chair.
6 minutes, noted. So I believe that this question answer session can take place after any motion that will be voted now. So for us voted committee and Delegate of Italy, what is your motion?
Motion on the topic strategies for reducing terrorism in the region. Each speaker will get 1 minute time to speak, and the total time is 15 minutes.
Can you repeat the topic, Delegate?
The topic strategies for reducing terrorism in the region.
Delegate, actually, we don't use the word terrorism in the United Nations. Could you reframe the topic?
Strategies for reducing non-state actors in the region.
Right, so we will be voting on the motion brought forward by the Delegate of USA. So delegates in favor of the motion by Delegate of USA, which is to discuss the allocation of the region of Jerusalem with a total time of 25 minutes and 1.5 minutes of individual speaking time. Delegates in favor. Delegates against the motion. So seeing that not all the delegates are voting, we'll redo the voting procedure again. So delegates in favor of the Delegate of USA's motion, please raise your hands.
Chair, I have a point
Right.
of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, delegate.
Can a delegate vote for more than one motion?
delegate, actually, that's not something that we'd like to see in the UN, because we'd like to see delegates having firm opinions on what to discuss in the committee. But it is technically possible.
Okay, Chair.
Right, so we'll be putting this voting procedure on standby. Now we'll be moving into the second moderated caucus. Second moderated caucus brought forward by the Delegate of India, which is to discuss the brief history of the land, investigating the true owner of the land in question. Delegates in favor? Delegates in favor of the motion brought forward by the Delegate of India, please raise your hands. And delegates against? Right, now we'll be discussing we'll be doing the voting procedure on the motion brought forward by the Delegate of Australia, which is an unmoderated caucus for the time period of 20 minutes. Delegates in favor? Delegates in favor of the Delegate of Australia's motion, which is an unmoderated caucus for a time period of 20 minutes. Delegates against? Delegates against the motion? Now we'll be voting on the last resolution, sorry, the last motion brought forward by the Delegate of Italy, which is strategies to reduce actions by non-state actors in the region, with speaking time of 1 minute per person and 15 minutes in total. So delegates in favor of this motion? And delegates against this motion? Right, so only the motion brought forward by Delegate of USA passes with most votes. So Delegate of USA, would you like to speak first or last?
The delegate would like to speak first.
That's noted. And regarding the question answer session, Delegate of Israel, would you like to entertain questions from Delegate of, I believe, DPRK after this moderated caucus?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so after this moderated caucus, we're going to have the Q&A session. All right, so delegates wishing to be under the GSL. The topic is allocation of the region of Jerusalem. DPRK. Delegate of Turkey. Delegate of Israel. Delegate of Japan. Delegate of Australia. Delegate of France. Delegate of India. Delegate of Mexico. Delegate of Canada. Delegate of Italy. So that'll be the GSL. Delegate of USA, you have the floor.
One second. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Executive Board. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States has brought up in the previous unmoderated caucus the idea of a plebiscite wherein the residents of Jerusalem may vote as to which nation or which entity they would like to join, Israel or a possible Palestinian state. However, we must bear in mind that this plebiscite would need to be fair, it would need to be overseen, and it would need to be administered in a way that we can ensure that the results are long lasting and they are the foundation for a new international framework regarding Jerusalem. Now, many delegates have thought of the idea of having Jerusalem administered by a foreign body. The United States remains adamantly opposed to this. Even if the United States were placed in charge of Jerusalem, we would not support this, because the people of Jerusalem have a right to dictate what is best for them, their lives, what is best for their culture, what is best for their, way of living. And it is an atrocity of one of the highest degrees to impose rule upon them. And thus we must make it a priority to follow democratic means in order to allow the people of Jerusalem, upon the creation of a Palestinian state, hypothetically, to choose which side to go to. The United States would prefer that first, after the rest of the territorial boundaries are drawn out, Jerusalem could hold a plebiscite so that it may be decided where it goes. That way, if it chooses to join Palestine, then there will be a stable state to join in the first place.
Delegate, please wind up your speech.
Stable. Thank you. And yeah.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points? Delegate of Australia?
Point of information.
Granted.
Thank you. So both, as mentioned previously in the unmoderated caucus, both the factions would have just come out of a bout of conflicts due to which there might be a prevalence of hatred on either side, which, if not moderated, would exacerbate the situation. So don't you think there should be an seeing of by an international entity, preferably by the diplomats representing
Absolutely.
UN?
Permission to respond?
Sure, Delegate, but before that, please do not use personal pronouns, delegates. Thank you. Yes, Delegate, you may continue.
Delegate of Australia, absolutely not. Regardless of violence, and remember, this is something way far in the future that we're talking about, after a hypothetical drawing up of the lines of the rest of Palestine and the rest of Israel. After this, we would get to vote in Jerusalem. Residents of Jerusalem would be able to vote. And the delegate of the United States does not see how violence would occur after this, but yes, the delegate of the United States agrees with Australia in that there is a propensity for there to be violence. And we believe that the IDF and Israeli internal police forces are well equipped to handle any kind of disturbances on their side. In addition, if necessary, while we do lean slightly against this, we would support an international peacekeeping force deployed in sparse numbers to just maintain order. We do not want to infringe upon the sovereignty of the state of Israel. We recognize Article 2, Section 7 of the UN Charter as being the foundational principle to our approach at this matter, and we hope that we can, work in this framework.
Delegate of Australia, is that fine?
I'll follow. The delegate would follow.
Please do invite you. Delegate of India? Do you have a point?
Delegate, yes, Chair. Delegate of the United States of America, you said that Israeli police is well armed, but what about the Palestinian government?
Right, Delegate, is it a point of information, point of order?
It's a point of information, Chair.
Right.
Chair, permission to respond?
Sure, Delegate.
Delegate of India, let's look at the authorities, in charge of Palestine at the moment. Palestine, or rather the region, the Palestinian entity, let's see, the Palestinian Authority, which is notoriously and eye-wateringly corrupt. You have Hamas, which the delegate cannot even begin to describe how disastrous it would be if Hamas was allowed charge of security in the region. You have Hezbollah, you have other non-state actors that simply cannot be allowed to engage in peacekeeping or policing in the region. And it does obviously go to say that the IDF and other Israeli police forces have at least some degree of accountability, some degree of responsibility, as opposed to these institutions that have no basis in the international community. They have no legitimacy, but the IDF does. And that is why the United States believes that the IDF is best equipped to handle any kind of disturbances that might arise.
I would request to follow up, Chair.
Sorry, Delegate, that was not audible.
I would request to follow up.
Right, Delegate, that's fine. So now we'll be moving to next speaker, Delegate of DPRK. You've been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Regards to Jerusalem, so though sharing the city into two, with Jerusalem being a Palestinian occupied territory and Israel being having the west part of Jerusalem, we have to also get reminded of the fact that Israel has taken whole of Jerusalem as its capital, which clearly implicates Israel's intention that it wants authority over whole of the city of Jerusalem, and it does not want to, get involved in a shared government. And moving on, how violence would be triggered if we have a shared government and if both the communities are like having access to Jerusalem, is that was one of the very important factors which we considered when talking about the one state resolution. So if both the communities were not able to live together side by side in peace in a nation, the same implies to a city. And also, as there are also religious aspects which are interfering here, there would be a rebellions, a destruction of holy premises, and many other things which could cause further crisis, and it can also be a disrespect to so many beliefs, customs, and human privileges. Moving on, when it is being governed by international territory, the people in Jerusalem are not being dictated by anyone, but they're just being governed efficiently with all the facilities provided to them, and they're having a scope for a better future. So when we have even saw like there different factors which are like complicating the peacemaking process, like borders, settlements, refugees, even the collaborative measures between the two countries, Jerusalem alone should not be standing out as a crucial factor, which is like being as a hurdling obstacle in resolving the conflict. So what this clearly implicates that when we make it into an
Delegate, could you wind up your speech?
Apologies, I'll wind it up. When it is made into an international territory, both the communities will be having unhindered access to the holy places, cultural sites, and they will be having an opportunity to fulfill their religious customs, and simultaneously human privileges and their fundamental rights will be affirmed. For those reasons, North Korea concludes on making Jerusalem into an international territory. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points? Delegate of USA.
Thank you, Executive Board. The delegate would like to raise a point of information. The delegate of North Korea mentioned that the Israeli government has stated the whole of Jerusalem to be their capital. While the United States agrees with this characterization and that we recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, why does the Democratic People's Republic of Korea believe that there's somehow any distinction from what the Palestinians are doing, which is also believing Jerusalem to be their capital? Would the same rules not apply if Palestine received it? Would this not be a supposed signal of intent, as the delegate had mentioned? So why is a separate double standard being held to the state of Israel and not to Palestine?
Point of personal privilege.
Yes, Delegate.
The delegate of North Korea did not understand the question raised by the delegate of USA. So for the question be answered through Chit.
Sorry, Delegate, you did not understand the Delegate of USA's question?
That be could the question be addressed through Chit?
Sure. Delegate, you may reply by Chit.
Thank you.
All right. So, sorry, the Vice Chair has to say something.
Yes, delegates, just to note, due to the time constraint, we will only be entertaining 2 points for each speech, so please keep that in mind.
Right, so we'll be moving on to the next speaker, Delegate of Turkey. You now have the floor.
So the city of Jerusalem is one of the most important topics, which we should address correctly, actually. So this city is quite important to three major religion groups, that is the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews. And they all three have major religious sites on this city. The city must be divided or at least shared in some way that all these religious sites do get certain amount of protection, so that incidents like what happened in the Al-Aqsa Mosque doesn't happen once again. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Would you like to yield your time?
I yield to comments.
So do you have any comments, delegates? Delegate of USA? Delegate of USA, do you have a comment?
No, I think I left my hand raised. Apologies.
All right. So are there any comments on the Delegate of Turkey's speech? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Delegate of India.
The Delegate of the Republic of India would like to disagree with what the Delegate of the Republic of Turkey said, because the Haram al-Sharif, the Al-Aqsa Mosque for the Muslims, and the Temple Mount are all located in East Jerusalem. How do we divide East Jerusalem for the Jews and the Arabs when they are in the same place?
Thank you, Delegate, for your comment. We'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Israel. You now have the floor.
Thank you for the recognition. The Delegate of Israel is a democratic nation. We believe in all the people to have equal rights and having the right to vote. That is why the Delegate of Israel would suggest voting to be done by the people of Jerusalem so they get the opportunity to decide their future. Once the people of Jerusalem decide which nation they want to be a part of, the entire issue would be sorted out. Now, to address the issue of religion, as we know, the three religions, Christians, Muslims, and the Jews, they all have their holy site as Jerusalem. What the Delegate of Israel would like to suggest to solve that particular issue is, if all the people of Israel or Palestine, whichever the people don't select to be a part of, if they are given visiting rights, then they wouldn't have to cross one entire nation to go to their site. And that would be one way to solve this without much hassle. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
To comments.
Comments. Are there any comments on Delegate of Israel's speech? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Japan. You now have the floor. Delegate of Japan. Delegate of Japan, you have been recognized. Seeing that Delegate of Japan is not here, Delegate of Australia, you now have the floor.
Thank you for the recognition. The question of Jerusalem, although one of the most sensitive and contentious issues in the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Commonwealth of Australia considers it as one of the most important issues requiring resolution and as a subordinate issue for driving conflicts. And as the delegation understands the gravity of the crisis, it pleads the committee to instigate a parley between the two concerning bodies. But presently, the Commonwealth of Australia recognizes West Jerusalem as the state of Israel's capital city, and it hopes for the city to be shared in accordance with the international laws. And as far as the question of division goes, the delegation endorses a partition plan in accordance with Plan 303 of number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegation would like to yield the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on the Delegate of Australia's speech? Delegate of USA.
For the benefit of committee, would the Delegate of the Commonwealth of Australia be willing to expand upon the plan that he mentioned in the final sentence of their speech?
Delegate of Australia.
Could the delegate rephrase, maybe?
Delegate, please make your a question a bit simpler.
Would, for the benefit of committee, would the Delegate of Australia be willing to expand upon the plan that they mentioned in the final portion of their speech?
It all depends on the changes made by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, not upon the delegates too.
To rephrase the question, like the delegate was asking what the plan is.
That was the reply. That was the reply. The delegate does not have that much powers to reflect his or her
understandable,
opinion.
Delegate. All right, thank you, Delegate.
Thank you. Do we have any other points? Any points? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Japan. Delegate of Japan. Delegate of Japan may speak later. Delegate of France. You now have the floor.
Well, the question of the status of Jerusalem must be settled with the framework of peace negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, focused on establishing two states, Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, with Jerusalem as the capital of both. Pending a negotiated resolution of the conflict and in accordance with the international law, particularly Security Council Resolution 478 of 1980, France does not recognize any sovereignty over Jerusalem. The French president has also stated that he did not approve for the President Trump's decision to move the US embassy to Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Thus, France calls for the easing of tensions and respect for the status quo concerning holy places, calling the status quo into questions which would risk causing serious destabilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Would you like to yield your time?
Comments.
Right. Do we have comments from delegates on Delegate of France's speech? Seeing none, we'll move on to Delegate of India. Do you have a comment?
Yes, Chair. The Delegate of India agrees with the Delegate of the French Republic. We too hold the same views and would like to work on the same.
Thank you, Delegate. Do we have any points on Delegate France's speech?
It's the widely accepted thing in the current situation.
Sorry, Delegate.
As it is.
Sorry, Delegate France. Could you repeat that?
As it is a holy place shared by all the ethnicity of people, it must be shared between the people of Jerusalem.
Delegate, you may not make remarks after your speech. If you'd like to communicate with a delegate, you may do it by chat. By chat. Delegate of Brazil, do you have a point?
Actually, comment.
Sure, Delegate.
May I?
Sure, Delegate.
Okay. We, the Brazil, would also like to support the France in its opinion. Insofar as holy places are concerned, the liberty of access, visit and transit shall be granted in conformity with the existing rights to all residents and citizens of the other state and of the city of Jerusalem, as well as to aliens, without distinctions as to nationality, subject to requirements of national security, public order and decorum.
Thank you, Delegate. Now we'll move on to the next speaker, that is Delegate of India. Delegate, you have the floor.
Thank you for recognition, Chair. At the heart of the conflict is the question of Jerusalem, a city of great religious importance to both the Jews and Arabs. A greater problem is that the Haram al-Sharif or Temple Mount are both located in East Jerusalem. The delegate would echo the partition plan of the UN, telling it out in other words. Jerusalem is neither the capital nor territory of both parties. We encourage everyone to respect the sentiments of all religious groups. Declaring Jerusalem as the capital of one side completely goes against this. We would give suggestions like Tel Aviv as the official capital of Israel, as it is its financial capital. Most countries have their embassies in Tel Aviv, which also makes this more viable. And for Palestine, good suggestions include Ramallah. India's representative office was shifted to Ramallah in 2003, and our former president, Pranab Mukherjee, said that he would like to see Ramallah as the capital of an independent Palestine. When we say international territory, we mean that Jerusalem can be accessed equally by people of all religions. There can be no guarantee that a plebiscite would bring equality in Jerusalem, as it would mean the direct eviction of Palestinians from there elsewhere. The compromise to allow Palestinians to still have access to these sites is doubtful. Also, another question. If Palestine wins, would the state of Israel be ready to lose access to their holiest site? Through this statement, the delegate hopes to make it clear that Jerusalem belongs to no one but the United Nations itself, and the question of having it as a capital for any one side is vague, according to Resolution 181 of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
I would like to yield my time to comments.
All right. Do we have any comments? Delegate of USA.
The delegate of the United States would like to comment that it is indeed unwelcome and rather unfortunate to hear these remarks, because the delegate of the United States believes that using the financial capital as the capital of a nation it sullies the soul of the nation. Suppose if India took Mumbai as the capital of their nation, would that not be a far cry from what they truly are? Would it not betray the soul of the country? Similarly, what if the United States took New York as our capital? That would simply not be true to what we do. In addition, why would Israel be unwilling to compromise on the plebiscite as long as the United Nations, as long as the international community can work towards getting to a point where both nations would be okay with the result? That's our goal here, to really find out at what point they would be all right. And so, yeah, the state of Israel might not be satisfied, they might not be pleased, but they definitely have a right to, enter into this agreement. In addition, the United States strongly disagrees with this notion that Jerusalem belongs to no one but the United Nations. This is abjectly false. This committee is deciding whether Jerusalem belongs to the Palestinians, whether it belongs to the Israelis, or whether it belongs to a mixture of both. How can we, as people sitting thousands of miles away, exert our own sovereignty upon this land? The delegate of the United States firmly hopes that such comparisons are not made again, that we can work together on a way that on a path forward that actually includes people who live in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Delegate. We'll have comments from Delegate of DPRK.
Delegate of DPRK strongly stands and supports stances as the resolution of considering Jerusalem as national territory is providing a secure environment, and it is also providing an opportunity for ethnicities to visit cultural sites without any hindrances. So, which means that it is an equitable, just, fair resolution in accordance with the civilians of Jerusalem. The delegate of DPRK strongly stands for India's resolution and allocation of Jerusalem.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Turkey, do you have a comment?
Yes. The delegate of Turkey strongly disagrees with the Republic of India on partitioning the city of Jerusalem. Instead, it should be shared by both the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any points on Delegate of India's speech? Delegate of...
Apologies for the emoji, wrong emoji.
It's fine. Delegate of DPRK, do you have a point? I believe also Delegate of Turkey has kept their hands raised. Right. So seeing none, we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Mexico. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to Jerusalem, Mexico considers it essential to recognize its special status in accordance with relevant United Nations resolutions and applicable international law. The Mexican government recognizes the undeniable connection of the Jewish people to the cultural heritage in East Jerusalem, while also noting the presence of Palestinian mosques present in this area. However, Mexico supports the 1967 borders from United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 and supports this land of East Jerusalem to be a region with full access to both populations so that they may visit their places of religious and cultural significance freely and with rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
To the chair.
All right. Are there any points? Any points on Delegate of Mexico's speech? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Canada. You now have the floor.
Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everybody has the right to express themselves, a right to express their opinions. Shouldn't the people living in Jerusalem have the freedom to express their opinions and vote on which government they should belong to? This is after the two-state solution is implemented and the hypothetical, and there is a state of Palestine. Shouldn't the people, sorry, shouldn't it should be up to the people to decide to whether to Palestine or Israel they should belong to, and also Canada believes that say the people of Jerusalem vote that they should belong to the state of Israel. Israel shouldn't deny the Arabs the right to visit their most holy site. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
Yield to another delegate.
Are there any, sorry, Delegate, I could not hear. Would you like to yield your time?
Yield to another delegate.
So as in the form of questions, comments, or like how exactly?
Yield to questions.
Sure. Are there any questions for Delegate of Canada? Right, seeing none. Oh, Delegate Turkey.
So the Delegate of Canada, I want you to clarify whether you want to see a two-state, one capital solution or a different sort of solution.
Canada wants to see a two-state solution, but whether Jerusalem belongs to Israel or Palestine, it should be up to the people living in Jerusalem.
All right. Are there any points? I'm seeing none. We'll move on to the next speaker, Delegate of Italy. You've been recognized.
The representative of the Italian Republic like to suggest Jerusalem as a shared capital for both the state of Israel and Palestinians, and would like to assert that a plebiscite would not be the most optimal solution with regards to equality. Having Jerusalem belonging to the UN is regarded as an impractical solution by the Italian Republic. Even after a vote, the majority would still be the Jews at 64% of the population in Jerusalem. And the opinion agreed upon by the majority would most probably be against the Palestinians. There's a very high chance that the majority's decision would not allow the passage of Palestinians in and out of Jerusalem. Hence, Jerusalem housing both populations is the effective solution. By any means, we must alleviate the current state of an increasing number of non-state actors in the region. The Palestinian non-state actors want a state and a capital of their own. By giving them Jerusalem and their own proprietary state, it can be assured that the conflict will eventually die down, at least from the Palestinian side of the debate. Hence, the Italian Republic, the representative of the Italian Republic would like to rest his case by saying that Jerusalem being a shared capital for both the Palestinians and the Israelis would be the most optimal solution.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
Yield back to Chair.
Thank you. Are there any points? Delegate of USA. Granted.
Delegate of Italy. The United States is intrigued as to why, just because the majority of people in Jerusalem are Jews, there is somehow any less kind of right to self-determination for these people. Okay, so there is a perception that somehow the result will go a certain way, or the result of a plebiscite might go a certain way. Is this not discriminatory to assume that Jews are going to vote one way or another? In addition, is it not discriminatory to forego a plebiscite just because it's a majority Jews? Would this not be the definition of anti-Semitism, as the delegate of the United States mentioned at the beginning of this conference? And finally, Italy as a nation has been a strong fighter against anti-Semitism. Can the representative for the nation of Italy recommit to that kind of sentiment?
Delegate of Italy.
Yes. So, Delegate of USA, the assumption of of there being an unequal vote that will not permit Palestinians inside Jerusalem, right? So that assumption was taken just because that Char, can I answer to chat me? I mean, chit me.
Delegate, was that clear?
Executive Board, the delegate requested to answer via chat. The United
Fair delegate,
States
granted.
that, so if
All right, are there any other points on Delegate of Italy's speech? Seeing none, we'll move on to Delegate of DPRK's speech. Delegate of DPRK, you have the floor.
Delegate had finished.
Sorry, Delegate, could you repeat that?
Delegate of DPRK has completed taking the stance in this moderated caucus.
All right, apologies. There must have been a mistake. Now we'll have Delegate of Brazil. You may be recognized. Delegate of Brazil. You now have the floor. Delegate of Brazil. So now we'll have Delegate of Japan. Delegate of Japan, you've been recognized.
Thank you, Chair. The final status of Jerusalem is a topic that has eluded many compromises between Israeli and Palestinian negotiators due to its extreme significance in culture for both parties. The nation of Japan looks forward to use democratic means to decide a solution for this issue. Japan supports the idea that Jerusalem should host respective capitals of two states on the basis of the 1967 borders, while recognizing the principle that Jewish neighborhoods should become part of Israel and Palestinian neighborhoods should become part of Palestine. Full access to holy sites and freedom of worship should be granted to all religions, and the old city within the walls would come under a special regime. Japan believes that issues relating to Jerusalem should only be resolved through the permanent status negotiations between the parties concerned. And until then, such a solution is achieved, both parties should refrain from taking any one-sided action relating to the situation in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. How would you like to yield your time?
To the Chair.
Noted. Are there any points on Delegate of Japan's speech? Delegate of Australia?
Point of personal privilege. Could the delegate repeat the last part of the speech? Last part of their speech?
Sure.
It's unclear.
Delegate of Japan, you must reread your speech from the middle part of your speech.
Sure, I believe the Delegate of Japan is frozen.
Delegate of Japan, can you hear it? Can you hear me? I believe the Delegate of Japan is, yeah, Delegate of Japan cannot hear us. I'd say we wait for one more minute. Right, Delegate of Japan is here. So Delegate of Japan, the Delegate of Australia did not understand your speech, the latter part of your speech. So could you please repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Japan believes that issues relating to Jerusalem should be resolved through permanent status negotiations between the parties concerned. And until such a solution is achieved, both parties should refrain from taking any one-sided actions relating to the situation in Jerusalem. Thank you. Does that satisfy?
Delegate of Australia?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Delegate of Turkey?
Point of information.
Granted.
So Delegate Japan, you did mention a regime that would take care of Jerusalem. So can you clarify on that regime? Like what is it composed of to be per se?
Permission to speak?
Delegate of Japan.
Are you asking if what it's about, or how it would be made, or how it would be maintained? It would be regarding the old city within the walls. The regime would. Can I reply via chat? I think I'll be able to explain.
Sure, Delegate. You may reply by chat,
Thank you.
but please refrain from using personal pronouns. Thank you. So any other points? Right, seeing none, we will be briefly moving into the question answer session brought forward by the Delegate of EPRK against the Delegate of Israel. So the time duration will be of 6 minutes, and only the Delegate of DPRK and Delegate of Israel may speak. So Delegate of DPRK and Israel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So the first question the Delegate of Israel would be about the unlawful annexation of water resources. So Israel has been annexing water resources which was granted to Palestinian population, and is that an attempt to eliminate all the Arab communities? And we also have to take into account that the UN conventions, policies, and also the international laws and policies states very clearly that the allocation of water resources need to be done using the per capita basis. So now, annexing water resources and denying the privilege of Palestinian people to access essential commodities, isn't this a violation of several policies, and isn't it a denial of fundamental human right privilege?
Okay, thank you, Delegate, for your question. Firstly, what the Delegate of Israel would like to say about this is that about water, of course, we all know water is a very important aspect of living, and it's quite essential for anyone to live. And yeah, it is used for life and for agricultural purposes. Now, about Israel in particular, we do have a lot of people living near the area who might require water. So one particular reason could be that the people who are living nearby would definitely need the water, and therefore they would take it from that place. Secondarily, the fact that you would ask, Delegate, about but that it's really wrong. Surprisingly, such an incident did happen during the 6-day war, I think, yeah, in 1967, where there was a water dispute, and the Arabs had diverted River Jordan, which is Israel's main source of water, to their side, therefore cutting off the water supply for the Israelis. Now, with regard to that, in that way, what they did was wrong as well. So it's just a mutual conflict that's going on. And we believe if the other issues get sorted out at the end, we will definitely try to sort out this issue as well.
Follow-up question regarding the same. So though it can be done even if it was a violation of the policies from the Palestinian side. So does that mean that Israel has to again replicate the same and do the same again? And moreover, even if there needs to be any additional annexation of water, or there's a need or requirement, that should be fairly notified, and it should be done through an obligation, and not mere unilateral annexation of water resources without any prior notification to the Palestinians. And my second question would be, there are also a lot of Jews.
Delegate, can I reply to your previous statement?
Sure.
Thank you. So yeah, with regards to that, we agree it was particularly maybe not the most mature decision, but unfortunately, what has been done has been done. So in that manner, yeah, in the future, the state of Israel will definitely try to have a more vocal conversation with the government of Palestine, and will definitely work on that. However, it was done for the people of Israel, and in that way, although it might not have been the best strategy, the reason why they did it was for the civilians and to more of a Cold War kind of way to protect the people and their rights. And the state of Israel will definitely try to mend its ways in the future.
Thank you for that honest confession. My next question would be like, now the expansion or the annexation of pre-occupied territories of Palestine, so it is being justified as Israel like its natural growth or its development for the nation. So it's a part of its natural growth, expanding its nation. And as Palestine is not being recognized as a fully formed nation, that it's justifiable or it is not like unlawful. But then, doesn't it seem very self-centric? Though it is a like how to say it is not abiding by the international policies of colonization. These forms of like annexation is not supported by any international policies. Israel justifying this these sort of expansion activities, stating its natural growth and nation's development. How far does it seem just, and how self-centric is this?
Thank you, Delegate, for your question again. So, like you had said, Delegate, we can't control the obvious development that's happening or how people decide where to settle. As our previous people have said that as of now, Palestine is not actually yet a complete, fully well-known state. So in that matter, we can't control the people from moving and migrating there because the population density has become too high in the area. However, what can happen is that the people can, if Palestine does become a state at any point of time, if put boundaries are kept, as right now, the Delegate of Israel had mentioned before in one of her JSL speeches about the current area being more like a jigsaw, where the exact boundaries are not completely notified and there are relatives here and there. So in that manner, if it is a change comes in the nearby future, and then we can definitely try to make amends on that. But till then, we can't take any solid action upon that, because as of now, it is still not a complete state. And
does that mean that just because it is not a complete territory or fully formed nation, it seems just fair to displace Arab settlers who are already there and to go annex and make Jewish settlements occupy those places which was previously occupied by Arab settlers? So does that seem justifiable for displacing someone who's residing there already? Though it can have national development and everything, these sort of like, this is also a violation of international policies, right? It like really contradicts with those conventions, which means that Israel's expansion activities of these forms cannot be justified as natural growth or any of the other reasons which were provided by the Delegate of Israel. My last question would be, what is the resolution which is best preferred by the Delegate of Israel, and why?
Okay, the Delegate of Israel believes that until the state of Palestine is completely declared as a state, we cannot completely say that it's because of religious reasons or we're trying to displace any of the Arab people from their nation, because it's not really all about religion. It's about the place. It's about how there's a mutual treatment that's been going on between the two places. And of course, we want to achieve peace, and we've been trying our level best to make sure there's some distance between us Israelis and between the Palestinians. And as long as they decide to respect the actions of the Israelis and where they choose to pray to, for example, about the Jerusalem issue, and that they should be given equal rights in that place as well. So unless there's no action that forces the Israelis to act against the Palestinians, we would be completely willing to maintain a mutual respect for the nation and to achieve peace as much as possible, because this particular conflict has been going on for the past around 7 decades, and it's been high time to put it to a stop.
Okay, the resolution, meaning the delegate did not answer to my question.
Delegate, actually, your allotted time of 6 minutes has exhausted. So I believe the Q&A session can end now. And as per our itinerary, we will be ending today's session, conference. We're supposed to end at 4:30, but due to this Q&A session, just rather interesting, we had to extend a little bit. So I hope that you don't mind. So 1 second.